morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme for you, talking about the strongest call yet from the US for a ceasefire in Gaza.
And will the Chancellor deliver a budget bounce for the government? We'll hear from them in a few minutes.
Plus, what's it like to cook at the Oscars?
Yeah, we've got loads of food. It's Monday, the 4th of March. The US Vice President Kamala Harris demands an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and insists that Israel must allow more aid in.
For all the innocent people in Gaza who are suffering from what is clearly a humanitarian catastrophe.
1 million gallons of burning diesel pour into the streets and a family destroyed. A report on the human suffering caused by the war in Ukraine. Anti-Semitism in football. One of England's most high-profile Jewish players tells Sky News how he became a target of hatred. Dancers in the Sky, the Northern Lights, put on an amazing show from Cornwall to the Hebrides.
I am sailing, I am sailing home again, across the sea.
Still sailing and still saving lives after 200 years. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution celebrates its anniversary.
Near you to be free.
Good morning, everybody. Our top story for you on The Breakfast Show this morning. The US Vice President Kamala Harris has issued what appears to be the sharpest US rebuke yet of Israel's conduct in its war with Hamas. Calling for an immediate ceasefire, Ms. Harris said that Israel isn't doing enough to stop the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle is in Jerusalem for us. What difference will it make? Alistair, good morning.
Good morning, Kay. Well, we know there's been growing frustration in the United States about the lack of humanitarian aid that is getting into Gaza and the lack of a new hostage deal. Now, Kamala Harris, as vice president, has often been used by the administration as the bad cop, if you like, the one who can voice in public perhaps what President Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken reserve for private. And so I think that when she speaks like she did last night, we can assume that what she had to say reflects the thinking inside the Oval Office. In the strongest rebuke of Israel by the US so far, the Vice President Kamala Harris has said that there must be an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
I will repeat. The threat of Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated. And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks.
The Vice President's comments represent a hardening of tone from the White House as Ramadan approaches. The framework for a deal has been in place for some time now, but the humanitarian situation is spiraling, and aid organizations warn that people in Gaza are starving. Over the weekend, the US carried out its first aid drop of 38,000 meals.
The Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses. They must open new border crossings.
There are thought to be 134 hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. Hamas is demanding the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prisons in exchange. Something that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has so far described as delusional. The two sides remain divided and are yet to find common ground, but talks are continuing in Cairo this week. So there's quite a lot of moving parts in what is going to be a very important week as we lead up towards Ramadan, which starts over the weekend. Firstly, the status of those talks for a new ceasefire and a new hostage release deal. Well, Hamas have now gone to Cairo, Egypt, one of the main mediators. The Israeli delegation has not. We understand that is because Hamas are yet to provide Israel with some information that they have demanded. That is the status of the hostages still inside Gaza, whether they are alive or dead. Now, that is something that the Israelis are holding out on, although there are reports here in the Israeli media this morning that some of the cabinet believe that it's an unnecessary demand and actually Netanyahu's playing politics, and without that demand, these talks could proceed much quicker and have a much greater chance of succeeding. Talking playing politics, Benny Gantz, a senior opposition figure, although who now sits in the war cabinet, is in Washington today for meetings with Jake Sullivan, the US National Security Advisor, Kamala Harris, as you just saw, the Vice President, and also the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken tomorrow. He will then go to London for meetings there with David Cameron and others before heading back to Israel. This has really irritated Benjamin Netanyahu. Gantz is a political rival. Many people believe that Benny Gantz could be Israel's next prime minister, and a lot of people here feel that if we got into a ceasefire period, that is when the politicians will start to make their move on Benjamin Netanyahu, because they hold him responsible for what happened on October the 7th. So a lot to watch out for.
OK, Alistair, I know that you'll update us throughout the rest of the week. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. All today's top stories for you now. Gareth here.
Yes, the US Supreme Court could rule today on Colorado's bid to ban Donald Trump from the state's presidential ballot. Colorado's Supreme Court decided in December that Mr. Trump was disqualified from running due to what it called his incitement of the Capitol riot in 2021. The former president strongly denies the claims, and his lawyers argue the riot did not amount to an insurrection. Earlier, I spoke to the investigative reporter with Raw Story, Alexandria Jacobson, about the possibility of Trump running.
As we saw in Colorado, they had ruled that President Trump potentially should not be eligible to be on the ballot due to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that says an insurrectionist should not be able to run for office. So given the cases involving Donald Trump's alleged involvement, we will see what their opinion is essentially going to be.
Haiti's declared a state of emergency in an attempt to regain control of the streets after an explosion of violence and mass prison outbreak. Armed gangs stormed the country's two biggest prisons over the weekend, freeing thousands of killers, kidnappers and other violent criminals. It's a new low in Haiti's descent into chaos and lawlessness. It's estimated that gangs have taken control of 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The conservationist Chris Packham has been given the green light to challenge the government's net zero rollback in the High Court. Mr. Packham claims it was unlawful to water down emissions-cutting policies without replacing them with others that aim to meet the UK's targets. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, announced the rollback in September, saying the approach to net zero was imposing unacceptable costs on families. Two women have been charged by police after targeting a bust of Queen Victoria at a museum in Glasgow. The pair, from an activist group called This Is Rigged, can be seen in video posted online pouring jam and porridge on the bust before spray painting a swear word and gluing themselves to the plinth. They were protesting against food insecurity. Motorists are being warned that some budget-friendly insurance policies might not cover them for common claims. The consumer group Which says cut-price policies might appear more attractive on comparison websites, but drivers should read the fine print. Some of the things often not covered included cracked windscreens.
On the 10th of February, a Russian strike on a Ukrainian fuel depot sent millions of gallons of petrol flooding into the streets of Kharkiv. 15 homes were set ablaze, killing entire families. Our international correspondent John Sparks reports now from Kharkiv on the pain and suffering felt by those living through the war.
In Ukraine, another calamity marks the night sky. Another disaster in this war-torn state. On February 10th, the Russians hit a fuel depot in the city of Kharkiv. 1 million gallons of diesel and gasoline poured into the streets, flowing like lava into a nearby neighborhood. 15 homes were destroyed. Tatiana Putatina lived here at number 32 with her son Grigory and his family of 5.
The children were asleep. There were 3 of them, 7, 4 and 10 months old. They just didn't have time to get out, to gather the children.
Tatiana was visiting a relative on the night of the attack, but her son and his wife Olna were caught in the blaze. They'd spent the past 2 years trying to keep their 3 boys safe. Alexei, the oldest, Mikhailo in the middle. Pavlo was still a baby.
They found my son here. This is where he lay. It looks like he was looking for a way out. Here in the bathroom, that's where she was. Olna was holding 2 of the children close to her chest.
This was Tatiana's home until a couple of weeks ago, but the structure is gone, and so is her life as she knows it. How do you come to terms with that? More than 10,000 civilians have been killed since the beginning of the invasion, and more than 500 of those are children. It is the pitiless product of a senseless war.
Of course it's hard. I come here every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I'll come here, walk around the house where they found their bodies. I'll shout, I'll cry, and then I'll leave.
It is a journey that she will continue to make on her own. John Sparks, Sky News in Kharkiv.
Ukrainian MP Kira Rodic is with us now from Kiev. Absolutely heartbreaking. Kira, good morning.
Good morning, Kay. Thank you so much for having me. You know, we always think that after each of those attacks that it couldn't be worse, but apparently it could. And this has happened over and over. 2 days ago, there was an attack on Odessa where 12 people were killed and 5 of them were children. And they were, when our emergency services were looking through the rubble, they have found bodies of 5 kids. And the youngest was 4 months old. And the mother that was also dead and who was holding and trying to protect the baby with her body. And I was just thinking what was going through her mind in her last seconds. And it's incredibly hard to process, realize and understand why in 21st century something like this is happening. And what can we do to make it stop?
China offering help again to try to organise peace talks. Is now the time that should start to happen?
Okay, if China persuades Moscow to stop their attacks on our cities and pull back the troops, that would be fantastic. But that's not what we see is happening. It's just another attempt for us to agree with what is happening and to make sure that we stop fighting, though we would not. Everything that happens to our country is terrifying, but there is one country that is responsible for that, and it is Russia, and it is in their hands to stop this. So whoever is thinking or talking about peace talks should start there in Moscow and make them stop the war. They have started it and they can stop it.
What do you make of reports of a recording of confidential army talks in the Ukraine war being circulated on Russian social media? What's happened there?
Well, the truth is Russia is using everything that they get as a propaganda, and we have no way of checking or ensuring if it is true or not. So we need to be very careful with everything that we receive from Russian media, because there has not been any good confirmations of that they were telling the truth, and there was not a good way on checking of what they are reporting. So we have just to make sure that, first of all the democratic countries are taking the cybersecurity and informational security very seriously, and we should not fall for Russian propaganda.
What we do know is that Polish farmers are continuing to protest, and I believe that as far as the borders are concerned with Poland, all of those are being shut at the moment. How are you going to resolve that?
It is incredibly painful for us, indeed. And we are hoping that Polish government, as well as Brussels, will find a way of unblocking the borders. From our side, we are acting according to the law. We are obeying the law, and we are in a very difficult situation where the Polish border is one of our ways to continue the trade and to continue to survive. We really hope that it is internal problems in Poland and in European Union, because we see the protests in all other countries as well, and not an attempt on hitting the neighbor where it really hurts. On the other hand, we are also working to support our armed forces who can keep our ports unblocked so the majority of the trade can continue through the Black Sea.
Final thought from you, Kira, before I let you go about your business today. Last time I spoke to you, you'd had the strike that was just a few metres away from your home, lots of damage around Christmas time. How are you doing now?
Thank you, Kay. We have put the windows back and we're trying to pretend that it is normal, though I still don't feel safe at home. But, you know, I can pay for my windows, and there are so many fellow Ukrainians who cannot, and we are trying to help them right now. And the damage that Russia creates every single day is growing, and people lose their homes, their families, and we are calling for the whole free world again and again and again to help us to stop this and to win the war.
OK. Well, do take care, Kira. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
Quick look at the weather for you.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Temperatures will slowly rise this week and the weather will settle down a little as well. It's a frosty start for many, some fog patches, mainly in the south. That fog will slowly lift during the morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but cloud and rain will spread across Ireland, South Wales and also southwest England. It's also going to be wet for Shetland.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Let's stay up in Scotland because they had some funky Northern Lights, didn't they?
They did.
Tell me more.
They did. Well, we would know them as the Northern Lights, but scientists call them the Aurora Borealis. I almost feel like Mara should be doing this story. But, you know, as I said, spotted in northern Scotland, usually seen in places like Norway and Iceland, but even down as far as Cornwall managed to get a snap of these. And let's have a look at them now. When we're looking at these lights, we're looking at what we've got there. That's a deep pink, that's a green one there. So that's when the solar particles are meeting oxygen, and some of the other colours mean very different things. Purple, blue and pink, that's caused by nitrogen. Deep red, that's caused by solar particles meeting oxygen at high altitudes. When we get a chance to see these, the Met Office say that what you need is you need clear sky, you need less light pollution, which is something we don't always get in this country. So for people to see them as clearly as this, they were really, really lucky indeed. And as I say, all of these lights are just the combination of different impacts of when the solar particles are meeting the Earth's atmosphere. So an incredible display all over the UK, really.
Which is amazing, because normally it's like in Norway and Iceland where you're more likely to see them. I know that I've travelled to Iceland to see the Aurora Borealis. But yeah, I have, amazing. But I've never seen them in the UK.
Yeah, and as clearly as this is the thing. I mean, it's not just about being able to see them, but to see them so clearly, not that common.
OK, it's good to see you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Coming up in just a few moments' time, we're going to be speaking to the Economic Secretary to the Treasury ahead of Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's budget, which is on Wednesday, of course, isn't it? So stay tuned for more on that. And also saving lives and livelihoods since 1824. We'll tell you how the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, RNLI, easier to say, is still sailing for its 200th year. All of that to come in just a few moments' time here on Sky News. Do stay tuned our way. Morning, everybody. Today is all about
about the economy. The Chancellor could be a real game changer in the general election.
Will be the pre-election fireworks.
Big set-piece event of Budget Day, of course.
Whether it will be enough is the big question.
Some may soon be promised a little more money in their pocket as we head towards the election. But will these budget giveaways be enough to gain your vote? Full coverage on Sky News.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we are going to be telling you a little bit more about what's happening in anti-Semitism in football. In fact, Rob is here with us. Tell me more.
Yeah, I've been speaking to one of the few British Jewish players to play professionally. Joe Jacobson is the Wycombe Wanderers captain. He's been talking about just how problematic anti-Semitism has been in recent months, particularly after the October the 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. And his own safety, he told me, has been put at risk at times, given some of the messages he's had into the club.
The club got sent some emails and letters demanding I apologise, demanding that if I didn't, they would barricade the gates at Adams Park on a match day. There was some plainclothes security that were kind of watching out and looking for anything, and fortunately there was nothing happened. But you know, I'm just going to a place of work and there's people worried about something that might happen, and that can't be right.
The 37-year-old has been at Wycombe for a decade, so he's quite a figure at the club. He's felt that football has overlooked anti-Semitism for far too long, and the fact very often if they want to respond or deal with it, they ask him because he is one of the few figures from the Jewish community playing the game. And, you know, he was talking to me about the sort of wider problem as well, and we've uncovered that with some data from the Kick It Out organisation that shows in the first 6 months of this season, there's been an increase 5 times on anti-Semitic hatred within football at the professional level and the grassroots compared to this time last season. There is also a significant rise in Islamophobia too. Certainly, though, Joe Jacobson feels he has had some sort of apologies about the inaction at times from authorities, the lack of solidarity, particularly when the FA did not light the arch in October after the attacks. And now he is part of a new FA task force which is trying to address the problem and to deal with some of that anti-Jewish hatred, which we see both online and in stadiums, and particularly actually linked to the use of a derogatory term for Jewish people that's used against some Tottenham fans as well, which is very prevalent online.
OK. For now, Rob, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. I'll tell you about a volcano on an uninhabited island in the Galapagos has erupted for the first time in 4 years. The skies above the La Cumbre volcano on Fernandina Island turned an ominous crimson red while lava tumbles towards the sea. While it's posing no risk to humans, the island is home to many animal species, including iguanas, penguins and flightless cormorants. Now, is this the ultimate fashion faux pas at Paris Fashion Week? Kim Kardashian was seen with the Balenciaga tag hanging from her black dress at an event in Paris. It seems the tag was removed once she was inside. Debate is raging in the fashion world about whether she meant to do it or not. Was she potentially going to take it back after she'd worn it?
Can you imagine? I mean, obviously these things are intentional. Come on.
Of course it was intentional. You're not telling me she didn't have a look before she set off?
Exactly. With an entourage of people dressing you.
The entire team of like, scores of people probably involved.
But we're
in
all
the planning.
talking about it.
We are talking about it.
Exactly. She's going to get free frocks for life.
There you go.
No, but we can get the top stories.
You certainly can get the top stories. We'll start with the US Vice President Kamala Harris demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, saying that Israel isn't doing enough to stop what she called a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. It's the strongest American rebuke yet of Israel's conduct in its war with Hamas. Sky News has seen the pain and suffering of people in Kharkiv in Ukraine after a Russian strike set a huge fuel depot ablaze. Entire families were killed. One of England's most high-profile Jewish footballers has told Sky News he's become a target for hatred. Wycombe Wanderers captain Joe Jacobson says he's witnessed a rise in anti-Semitism since October the 7th and now needs security to escort him into his club's grounds. And the Royal National Lifeboat Institute celebrates its 200th year saving lives at sea.
Be chatting about that in more detail a little bit later on, and going up to Whitby actually to chat to who's there. I think who's there for us? I've forgotten.
Shingy Mary.
Shingy's there, of course he is, and we're going to be chatting to one of the lifeboat men as well. It's all voluntary, isn't it?
Absolutely remarkable. It's voluntary, and when commercial vessels, huge vessels, are in absolute dire straits, they go out in what are relatively tiny boats, all raised for by donations as well. It's remarkable what those guys do.
Yeah.
I rather them than me. It's incredible work, and the fact that it's been such an institution for so long as well is incredibly impressive.
I wonder if we've got the weather. Can we have a look at what the weather's going to be like for them today? Have we got that set up so we can have a quick look at that, please? Let's have a quick look at what's going to happen for them a little bit later on today, and indeed for you as well.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Temperatures will slowly rise this week and the weather will settle down a little bit as well. It's a frosty start for many, some fog patches mainly in the south. That fog will slowly lift during the morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but cloud and rain will spread across Ireland, South Wales and also southwest England.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Pleased to say Bim Afolami, Economic Secretary to the Treasury, is with us this morning. I don't think I've had the pleasure before.
No, I'm very excited.
Me too. Not as excited as I am. Talk to me about how excited you might be about meeting George Galloway in the House of Commons.
OK, I'm not that excited about that. Look, I think it was an appalling spectacle, really, for our democracy, what happened in Rochdale. But you know, he has rights. He's been elected by the people of Rochdale.
Why do you say? Why, I mean, it was a democratic election.
Yes, it was.
So he's perfectly entitled to.
He is, but I think that sort of divisive rhetoric, the behaviour, and frankly from the Labour Party as well. I know you're asking me about George Galloway, but I think that we're only in this position because of really the behaviour of the Labour Party in relation to that. And look, we are where we are, and hopefully this will be an exception rather than something that grows.
You guys are not without guilt. I mean, we've seen what Lee Anderson has been up to the extent where he's had to have to be suspended by the Prime Minister. What did you make of the Prime Minister taking upon himself to actually speak to the nation outside Downing Street on Friday evening, I think it was? I mean, it's only the second time he's done that, and the first time was when he was elected as Prime Minister.
The truth is that the Prime Minister feels very, very strongly about this. And he is, you know, the first non-white Prime Minister. I think that he definitely sees a responsibility he has to promote the hugely positive multicultural democracy that we have. But that is only there when, broadly speaking, society behaves in a sensible and grown-up way. And there have been some worrying signs over the last few months, particularly since the October 7th attacks in Israel, that have shown that things are going in the wrong direction. I think the Prime Minister felt very strongly, and felt the need to call that out.
Yeah, I mean, people will say he hasn't been elected, but of course he was elected by MPs. So there, for people, save you mentioning that on Twitter. But how is the sort of language that the Prime Minister was using going to calm down people?
Well, it's twofold, really, the way I see it. First of all, it shows people that they have a Prime Minister who cares about the community cohesion and that everybody has a right to live here in a way that is undisturbed and not being intimidated by small minorities of people. And they know they've got a Prime Minister who cares about that. And then secondly, in the coming weeks, we're going to be setting out more detail about how we're going to improve the situation. But it's worth saying, I think that since the October 7th attacks, over 30 people have been arrested under terrorism offences. So we are clamping down, we are using the laws that exist, but there's always more that we can do. And in the coming weeks, those will be set out by the Home Secretary and others.
OK, talk to me. What's the point of me asking you about the budget? Because you're not going to tell me anything, are you? But you are going to tell me something about £92 million of joint government and industry investment to expand facilities.
Yes, so Siemens are investing £100 million in Chippenham for our research and development that is going to a railway signalling project. Now, this may seem sort of old-fashioned, I suppose, or old-style investment, but this is highest-grade new technology, and it's just one example, in addition to many others. There's £360 million we're spending on advanced manufacturing more broadly in things like EVs and other areas, life-saving drugs. This is detail for what came out in the autumn statement last year, which was setting out over £4.5 billion in research and development. All of these numbers matter, all of this stuff matters because, not just for the jobs that are being created, it matters because this is the new economy that will help grow our economy over the coming years. It's a long-term down payment.
I knew you'd tell me lots about that. What can you tell me about the budget?
What I can tell you about the budget is I'm not going to go into individual taxes and what may happen or individual spending allocations.
Do you know?
Well, what we're going to do...
Do you know, as the Chancellor discussed with you, what's going to happen?
Of course, in the Treasury, we discuss all sorts of things.
Fantastic. So what can you tell me?
What I can tell you is that we're going to take a balanced approach. We've got to, broadly speaking, set out a path, as the Chancellor said yesterday. We've got to set out a path to a lower tax economy overall over the coming years. But we're only going to do that in a sustainable way and focus on increasing productivity at our public services. For people have this debate, they say, well, what about... is it lower taxes and you're starving public services and whatever? Actually, we need to make sure that the outputs from public services are as good as possible. So what people actually see, what they actually get, whether they get their hospital appointments, whether the police are clamping down on crime, that's why we are investing £800 million, we're announcing today, £800 million in improving the productivity of public services. What does that look like? It means investing in using artificial intelligence to improve the speed of
cut
MRI scans.
Yeah. Are you going to cut
example.
national insurance?
Look, as I said, I'm not going to get into detailed taxes.
What about income tax?
I can't get into individual taxes. You know, we can play this game, but I can talk to you about the general approach.
OK, what can you tell me about suggestions that flights might be going to Rwanda by the end of this month?
Well, I think the Rwanda bill is in the House of Lords today and this week, and we call on the House of Lords to listen to the democratically elected House of Commons, which passed, it passed with a good majority in the House of Commons, and the Lords, yes, they have a right to scrutinise, but they ultimately shouldn't block what is the will of the elected House of Commons, and so I urge them to pass it without delay.
Yeah. My question is, do you think that the planes might be taking off as early as the end of this month, as is the suggestion?
It's impossible until we know how quickly it can get through Parliament, so I can't give a commitment to a particular time.
OK. Have you listened to Jack and Sam's podcast yet?
I haven't, no.
You should, because they talk an awful lot about it, and they're suggesting that potentially the planes could go by the end of this month. And if that is the case, we may well see an early general election.
Well, look, I'm the Prime Minister is the one who decides on such things.
Are you ready for whenever the election comes?
Of course we're ready.
Are you, in your constituency, ready for an election as early as May?
Look, we are all ready this year. We know it's going to be an election year. We don't know when the election's going to be.
Yeah, but if it's going to be in May, then we're going to see a bit of a giveaway in this budget, aren't we? I'm trying one last time.
I can't give you any detail, Kay, about the budget on taxes.
I thought you were thinking about it then, no?
I can't do it. No, I wasn't even considering the idea.
OK, it's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Somebody who does know exactly what's going on, of course, is the Chancellor, who was doing the rounds yesterday. And, of course, the Prime Minister will know as well. All of them staying tight-lipped, at least for now. Of course, we will be covering the budget as and when it happens on Wednesday, just after Prime Minister's question time. And then, of course, we'll have an idea, Mari, whether or not we are going to get tax cuts. What's your best guess?
Yeah, I think it's always difficult to say. The Treasury continue to insist that nothing is set in stone yet. They're still in discussions, live discussions over things like squeezing public sector finances, for instance. So I think the expectation, especially here at Sky News, we kind of are expecting it's going to be realistically national insurance or income tax, and it looks like it's leaning more toward a two pence cut rather than a 1 pence cut to try and have the kind of maximum impact. Now, as far as our sources are telling us, this budget is not seen in government as being a kind of a game-changing, poll-winning budget, for instance. So I don't think there's an expectation this is going to completely and utterly turn the tides for the Conservative Party. The rhetoric really in government is more that this is a demonstration of them being on the way, being on the right direction, as it were. And that's why they keep talking about this pathway to a low-tax economy. It's always about a pathway and a journey rather than the destination. So very much the budget won't be, we've arrived, we're finally the low-tax economy we want to be, but more, this is the first step in that direction. So I think that's a lot of expectation management there from government. I mean, Bim Afolami there, again, not giving you anything.
Nothing.
Absolutely.
Tell me nothing.
Shred, Kay. So
tell me nothing about anything, really.
Yeah, I know. I think that's the whole point, though. They're just holding their breath until the budget comes. I think the expectation from Labour, we know again and again and again, they said they will support tax cuts for working people, which is also why some people are leaning more toward national insurance, because it's those who work, whereas income tax would include pensioners and it would cost even more, and therefore might be trickier to try and find all of that money, especially if you're not going to abolish the non-dom status to try and raise revenue. That's still quite a controversial decision. We don't know if it's going to be made yet or not. I think it's also important to remember the budget. The crunch moment really is on Thursday when the economic think tanks start to react.
Exactly
and
that.
They start to analyse.
Let me bring in Wilf, if I may. Wilf, the Minister gave me nothing.
Well, I was about to say perhaps the biggest takeaway from all of this is credit to Rachel Reeves for deciding to do her media round after the budget. We have this we have this a lot, obviously, coming out before big events and therefore not being able to go ahead. There's no one event than before the budget and autumn statement when you see the Chancellor days before other economic Treasury ministers as you get closer, and they really can't say anything. And all we care about are the specifics. There are other topics where we do care a little bit more about the bigger picture, so you can still get something from it. But do you know what was also really interesting there, Kay? And it's another topic. Not just does the Economic Secretary to the Treasury not know specifically yet what's going to be in the budget, or certainly not willing to reveal it. Nobody, it seems like, knows when the election's going to be, which is really quite amazing. That is a decision of one person and one person only. And even cabinet members, I don't think, have quite any certainty about when it's going to be.
Yeah, I don't think the Prime Minister knows either, to be honest. But if you listen to Jack and Sam's podcast today, they're making the point that all of the overseas meetings and trips that are supposed to be organised months in advance, they're still waiting for those to be inked in to the diaries for April and May. That's interesting, I thought.
Very interesting indeed. And of course, last week when we saw those rumours about the abolition of the non-dom tax status, you saw other stories saying Labour wondering whether they're interpreting that as they're going to go sooner rather than later, and everyone's saying they're ready, but we just don't know. The one thing I'll say about that leakage of the possibility of abolishing the non-dom tax status is it's quite different from the leak that we got before the autumn statement, where we all then started debating about whether inheritance tax was going to be abolished or not, because the latter, the inheritance tax abolition leak, was very much to appeal to a small Tory base, whereas this one kind of appeals a bit more broadly, it's a bit more progressive, so it'd be odd to leak it and then take it away, albeit again, as Mari's suggesting, it was a sort of 2 or 3 day bit of excitement, and now isn't the top of everyone's agenda approaching this budget.
Got to leave it there for now, Will. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Special budget coverage on Wednesday, of course, here on Sky News. The programme presented by Sophie in Westminster. Sarah Jane will be in Grimsby. Ian will join from a factory in Ipswich. Scan the QR code on your screen right now. You can listen to Jack and Sam. 200 years ago today, in a London tavern, the RNLI was founded. Since 1824, nearly 150,000 people have been rescued. Shingi Mariki has travelled to Whitby and spoken to the volunteers using their spare time to save lives.
For 2 centuries, the RNLI has represented the best of Britain, an army of volunteers saving lives at sea in their spare time. This is footage from 1924 of a team rushing to a rescue in Whitby. 100 years on, change has swept through the shores of this town on the northeast coast. But that lifeboat service is still here, showing the same spirit. We joined the RNLI team here on a training exercise aboard their multi-million-pound Shannon-class vessel, funded entirely by donations. The technology on board is top of the range, but the crew embody an old ethos, one of wanting to help their community.
Come further around now to 300.
Taking part in this mock-up of a man overboard scenario is 21-year-old Max, one of the station's youngest volunteers.
It's pretty busy, so I work 7 till 5 Monday to Friday, so that means I'm on service from 5:30 at night till 5:30 in the morning, plus weekends. It can be quite busy because, like on Friday, for example, I got in the house at 5:30. My tea was on the side warm. As I was about to eat, we got called out, so I had to leave my tea there, straight to the station, and I got home at about 7 o'clock. So it was a long day, but at the same time, very rewarding.
Teams are now called out to powered boats, paddle boards, and more, while mental health call-outs are more common.
The RNLI started out as fishermen called to save people from shipwrecks. 200 years later, the volunteers are from all walks of life. One thing that has stayed the same, though, is the close connection they have to the communities they serve.
There they are, boats, there they are! Those rescues can be moments of real jeopardy, like this.
You okay?
2 rowers clinging onto their boat, which had capsized on the North Sea. Emma, who was saved that day, is not only grateful to be alive, but determined to give back.
I've now been inspired to actually become a volunteer here at the RNLI, so I'm going to be volunteering as a water safety advisor. And I think now for both myself and Tom and our families, the RNLI, are a big part of our lives. The reason that we are here is because of them.
Her story is like so many others. Lives have not only been touched by this charity, but saved by it. which is why on these shores and across the country, the RNLI continues to matter. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Whitby.
Joining us now from Whitby is the RNLI station mechanic, Richard Daron. Hi, Richard. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. What's it like being a member of the RNLI?
Yeah, it's very rewarding, as Max said in his interview earlier on there. Yeah, it is a very rewarding thing to do. I've done it for quite a long time, and there's a great sense of community, and you know, all the crew and everybody. We're like a small family here, and you get a great amount of satisfaction from it.
What's your job?
So I'm the station mechanic, so day-to-day general maintenance on the boats that we have here at Whitby, and you know, defect repairs and things like that, but ultimately making sure that the vessels are ready to go to sea at a moment's notice, because we never know quite when they're going to go.
And do you go out on the shouts as well?
I do, yeah. As a mechanic, the vessel always needs one of the mechanics on board. So, yeah, just in case anything does go wrong at sea, as long as I'm doing my job properly and the maintenance is all up to speed, and you know, thankfully we don't get that many faults with the vessel, but it needs a mechanic on board just so in case you know, something goes wrong, we have to put it right to be able to get ourselves back again.
I'm guessing it can be a bit hairy at times.
It certainly can, yeah. The vessel that we're stood on at the moment is an all-weather lifeboat, so you know, we go to sea regardless of what the weather's doing. You know, should they need us, should somebody be in difficulty out there, we'll go regardless of weather. So yeah, at times it can be very hairy and a dangerous place to be, but we're provided with the best kit, as you can see from you know, behind me here on the vessel. You know, she's new to us, this boat. We got her in May last year. But it's definitely proven itself to be a very suitable vessel for what we need.
What motivates you? What makes you want to do what you do?
Well, like I said, you know, just being part of the you know, the RNLI community here in Whitby, and you know, helping even our own volunteers, helping them, seeing young Max there, who we talked to earlier, seeing him come through the ranks and training him, you know, and all that sort of stuff that we get involved with. It's very satisfying to do.
Okay. We must let you get on. Thank you for your service. We really appreciate you taking the time as well to join us this morning. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you Monday morning, we'll get a taste of the Oscars with chef Elliot Grover as he prepares to showcase British classics at one of Hollywood's biggest nights.
So it's a comedy improvisation show. So we ask the audience for suggestions and then we make stuff up based on what they say. So they're a part of the show.
I do that for a living.
Yes.
So do we.
So do we.
You do sometimes, I mean, there is sometimes we play a game where we ask people to write down lines of dialogue, and because it's sort of anonymous, sometimes people write down things you think, no, that's not going to be funny. You know.
Filthy thing.
Or if there's a very bad tragic story in the news, you know that's not something that you're going to get any laughs from, or you would want to. But also as well, when you ask people to shout out suggestions, they sometimes shout out things like, you say, could I have a place of work? And I'll say, abattoir. And you go, well, that's not going to, you know, there's not going to be much fun in that. That's part of what I think entertainment can be, is an escape from the real world for a while, a kind of sort of relaxation away from it, a kind of sort of refresher, so that you're not always constantly thinking about what's in the news, because let's face it, the news by its very nature is usually pretty grim.
You constantly feel slightly nervous or excited. It depends how you view it. I think it's exciting, and it slips into nerves if you haven't done a show for a while, or if there's somebody in that you particularly want to impress. But mostly it's just exciting. It's a good adrenaline ride.
The first time when I started doing improvised comedy back in the 80s, I did quite a bit of work with Mike Myers, who went to, you know, people will know from Austin Powers and Wayne's World. And he was so fluent at what he did that I remember just looking at him thinking, I can see you doing it, but it still seems impossible. But of course, after a few months of practice and experience, you start to not be as good as him, but you start to be as fluent. The great thing about sort of the improvised comedy thing is, like, you have a comic idea and you do it, and you find out straight away. In comedy, you find out straight away whether it's funny or not because the audience tells you by laughing. You can have a comedy idea, write it down on a piece of paper, hand it to somebody, a TV organisation, not hear anything for about a year, and it comes back with not funny stamped on it. You know, whereas with this, you can immediately get that rapport and that instant reaction.
At the Comedy Store in London.
OK.
Yes.
How long for?
Well, we start on Wednesday, March the 6th, and then we keep going. It's a residency.
You improvise?
So, yeah, we're there every Wednesday. At some point...
And Suki Webster's improv show.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
At some point, we'll take a break, but for now, we're there every Wednesday at the Comedy Store.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. We're going to be chatting to Wilf momentarily. Before that, though, let's talk about this amazing food that's in front of us. Yes. Elliot Grover, exec chef at Cuts, is also with us. Tell me about the food before I start eating it.
Absolutely. So we've got some of the most amazing British classic dishes which we're doing at the Oscars. So we've got a beautiful lobster fish and chips, bit of tartar sauce, and we've even put the classic British fork, which the Americans love.
Yeah.
Naturally.
So this is all food for the after party?
Yes, so the governor's ball. So they go to the actual Oscars, they get their award, and they go up the stairs to the governor's ball, which they'll get these dishes.
OK.
We've also got the prawn cocktail roll, which is served in a soft brioche, sort of 3-biter.
Amazing.
A little bit of caviar for the
Yeah.
Oscars.
Yeah.
So, last of all, we've got the amazing Wagyu roasted Yorkshire pudding, roast beef, creamed horseradish and watercress, and it is absolutely amazing. So hopefully they like it.
I'm sure they will. How do
Yeah.
you decide on the menus? Or which one should I try first? Can I try?
Oh, you can try one, yeah. Probably the prawn cocktail roll to start, yeah.
Amazing.
There you go.
Thank you. I'm going to have... Do you want some?
Go for it, yeah.
Do you want a prawn?
Yeah, go on then. I'll have a prawn then for you.
There you go. So it's a little bit of Mary Rose sauce.
OK.
Keeping it as classic as possible.
Thanks.
Hopefully they love it, but
Yeah.
let's see.
So, but, I mean, they've got the fancy frocks on and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, everything had to be taken into consideration.
Notice I said the caviar for me.
Oh, yeah, the big piece. Yeah, well, why not? Why not?
And how many covers are you doing? Like, what's the scale of this?
It is actually enormous. It's around 2,000 people. And there's like a huge, huge queue. And I'm looking, I'm like, surely that's not the queue for this stall. Because there's like 10 stands within this governor's ball. It's like ballroom. And there's just queues and queues of people. But we were quite popular because we were doing the British food. And the Americans love fish and chips and all that kind of thing. So it was super, super, super popular. Couldn't keep up, obviously. But, you know, carried on, carried on. There's only 3 chefs on that front desk. So...
How did you decide what to cook?
It was back and forth with myself and Wolfgang Puck, the chef. And he said, just do something that represents Britain. So fish and chips, roast beef and prawn cocktail. You can't get any more British.
But that's, did you say that's lobster?
Yeah, so last year we did fried haddock, but this year we did lobster, just to change it up a little bit and make it a bit more luxurious.
OK, I'm going to try that as well, please, if I may.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. I don't know why everybody's laughing at me. So, did you eat the prawn?
I did eat the prawn. Very good.
Good,
Amazing.
yeah.
Which big names made it to your stall? That's
Yeah, great question.
Wow, there were so many amazing people. And I mean, for me, Brendan Fraser, obviously, he had won the Oscar last year, and he was so lovely. Lady Gaga was amazing. I started singing Poker Face to her, but she wasn't too impressed.
Did she keep a poker face?
Yeah, she did, and she was really sweet. And she loved the fish and chips. It was really...
Do you get nervous?
Do you want to try the lobster?
Yeah, go on then.
No, I mean, I'm sort of used to it now, to be honest. And I mean, it doesn't matter who you're cooking for. You just sort of, everyone's the same for me.
Yeah.
So, you know, you just do your best.
How do you keep it warm?
It's literally, because you're going through so much of it, you're just doing it fresh. And they're bringing that from the back kitchen, and we're just assembling the dish.
Right.
Yeah,
OK.
that's
Back
the
kitchen.
roast
I
beef.
know. I was thinking.
This is the
Wagyu,
best one.
isn't it?
Yeah. This is the Wagyu beef.
Yeah.
And we roast the Yorkshire pudding in a little bit of Wagyu fat, so it gives it that sort of shine and crunch. It's a lot more sort of luxurious than normal.
Right.
But it's delicious.
And do they come back for more? Do you have to say you've already had yours?
They do, and some people will be asking, can I have extra beef, and being cheeky, but that's all good.
Oh, that's ace.
Fantastic.
What's the cheekiest celeb you've ever had?
Oh, cheekiest. Oh, do you know what? I had a lady next to me, and she kept talking to me for about half an hour.
Right.
While I was serving, and I didn't have a clue who it was. Anyway, people started taking photos with her. So I said, oh, you know what? I'll get a picture. And then she said, oh, me and my husband, if you would like to come back to the after party in Beverly Hills, you're more than welcome.
Oh.
I never went because I didn't really realise who it was, and it was Lisa Vanderpump.
Oh,
and she was honestly the sweetest person. So I'm hoping this year I see her again and we can go and have
back.
an
You've
after party.
got to go to, yeah,
for sure. I'll take the chefs with
spectacular
me.
house she's got.
The Wagyu beef is also incredible, by the way.
It is excellent.
It's wonderful.
How many of you
gave you a
does it
piece,
take
didn't
to put this on?
I'm fine with beef.
There's around 300 chefs doing the preparation, and I mean, I
Do you take the foods out? Sorry.
No.
So many questions.
We're all very excited about your food.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. So there's 300 chefs. I go on Tuesday, and then I'll be in the kitchen from Wednesday. But there's a lot of preparation which goes into it. But the crazy thing is, on the night of the Oscars on the Sunday, Wolfgang Puck will go into the kitchen and he'll say, right, let's go. And then it's all cooked fresh. So it's like nothing hanging around, everything's sparkling. It's super
And
wonderful.
do you take products out with you, or do you use the products there?
No, so we try and use all the local ingredients
Right.
to try and keep it sustainable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty much it with that.
Fantastic. How long are you going for?
Going there for a week, come back on the Monday night. I thought I'd come back at 9 o'clock in the evening the next day because I'll probably be tired after that huge day.
Fantastic.
Well, after the after party as well, that you're definitely going to.
Yeah, I'll try
I'll get you
to.
that invite. We're going to make a...
Oh, you can come with me, it's fine.
Thank you for bringing this in.
No worries.
Absolutely sensational. They were saying to us, oh, you won't eat it because it's not very warm. It's like, yeah, we will.
Yeah, that was good. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's really good. Safe flight. Enjoy
you so
it.
much.
Go to the after party, as you
Yes.
said. And let us know how you got on.
Absolutely, I will do. Thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you
Great
for coming in. Much appreciated. Thanks a lot. This is excellent.
Very, very good. The Wagyu in
the
particular.
Wagyu beef is great, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely superb. And did you try this?
I did not try this.
OK, have a go. Have a go at that. We are back in just a couple of moments' time with all today's top stories here on Sky News, including we've already asked the Minister how they feel about greeting George Galloway when he goes to the House of Commons later on today. I'll be asking Labour that as well in just a few moments' time. Please stay tuned. morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme for you, talking about the strongest call yet from the US for a ceasefire in Gaza.
A few clues from a Treasury minister this morning about what we can expect in Wednesday's budget, and we'll hear from Labour very shortly.
I don't think there were any clues.
None. Tiny hints,
Yeah.
but almost nothing.
Crumbs.
Plus, a Paris Fashion Week faux pas, a dress and a tag. We'll tell you more.
No, she meant that.
She did indeed.
She did. It's Monday, the 4th of March. US Vice President Kamala Harris demands an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and insists that Israel must allow in more aid.
For all the innocent people in Gaza who are suffering from what is clearly a humanitarian catastrophe.
1 million gallons of burning diesel pour into the streets and a family destroyed. A report on the human suffering caused by the war in Ukraine. Anti-Semitism in football. One of England's most high-profile Jewish players tells Sky News how he became a target of hatred. Dancers in the Sky, the Northern Lights, put on an amazing show from Cornwall to the Hebrides.
I am sailing home again, across the sea.
Still sailing and still saving lives after 200 years. The Royal National Lifeboat Institute celebrates its anniversary.
Be near you to be free. I am flying.
Let's have a look at our top story for you this morning here on The Breakfast Show. The US Vice President Kamala Harris has issued what appears to be the sharpest US rebuke yet of Israel's conduct in its war with Hamas, calling for an immediate ceasefire. Ms. Harris said that Israel isn't doing enough to stop the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Let's get more with Alistair Shadri, who's standing by in Jerusalem for us. Hi, Alistair. Will it make any difference?
Well, we know that the Americans have become increasingly frustrated with Israel and what they perceive to be the lack of humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, but also the Americans are pushing very hard for a new ceasefire and hostage release deal. The Vice President Kamala Harris has often been used by President Biden as bad cop, if you like, voicing stuff in public that perhaps the President and the Secretary of State reserve for private conversations. And so when she speaks, and when she speaks in strong terms like she did last night, I think we can assume that that reflects the thinking inside the Oval Office. In the strongest rebuke of Israel by the US so far, the Vice President Kamala Harris has said that there must be an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
I will repeat, the threat of Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated. And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks.
The Vice President's comments represent a hardening of tone from the White House as Ramadan approaches. The framework for a deal has been in place for some time now, but the humanitarian situation is spiraling, and aid organizations warn that people in Gaza are starving. Over the weekend, the US carried out its first aid drop of 38,000 meals.
The Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses. They must open new border crossings.
There are thought to be 134 hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. Hamas is demanding the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prisons in exchange. Something that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has so far described as delusional. The two sides remain divided and are yet to find common ground, but talks are continuing in Cairo this week.
One of the big questions, Alistair, is how many of the hostages are still alive and where are they? That seems to be one of the sticking points in any potential ceasefire?
Yeah, it does. Israel is said to be demanding a list of Hamas that shows them the status of the remaining hostages inside Gaza. Around 134, we think, are still being kept inside Gaza. So Israel wants to know of those who is alive and who is dead. And apparently Hamas have not given them that information. And as a result, Israel has not sent its own delegation to Cairo for an extension of these talks. So that does seem to be one of the major sticking points at the moment. Now, despite that, the general view amongst a lot of the mediators, whether it's the Americans, the Qataris, the Egyptians, even Hamas themselves, is that the two sides are pretty close to a deal, barring these outstanding issues. And you know, I sort of read someone this morning saying in Israeli media that they reckon it's 50-50 at the moment whether a deal can be achieved. Ramadan, which starts at the end of this week, that is the kind of the deadline that everybody has set to try and reach a deal. And so we'll see intensive talks taking place through the week, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more international pressure on both sides to make sure that they close that divide.
OK, for now, thank you. Let's talk about one of England's most high-profile Jewish footballers, spoken to Sky News about how he's become a target for hatred. Rob, good morning.
Morning, yeah, this is the Wycombe Wanderers captain, Joe Jacobson, one of the few British Jews to play professionally. Is at League One side at Wycombe, and he's spoken about how he has become a target of hatred, particularly following the October the 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. There are attempts to get him thrown off the team. And even as we're preparing to do the interview, a post from the club marking his testimonial and an event for his 10 years at the club was receiving abuse online. And he said that he wasn't experiencing this in the past. And one particular post that he did send out criticising the anti-Israeli protest was a rarity. He hasn't commented much on the war itself. But this is what Joe Jacobson had to say about the response the club faced.
The club got sent some emails and letters demanding I apologise, demanding that if I didn't, they would barricade the gates at Adams Park on a match day. There was some plainclothes security that were kind of watching out and looking for anything. And fortunately, there was nothing happened. But you know, I'm just going to a place of work, and there's people worried about something that might happen, and that can't be right.
Well, we've also obtained some data from Kick It Out, which monitors racism in football, to show there's been a 5-fold increase in anti-Semitic incidents in English football this first half of this season compared to the previous year. A lot of them in the grassroots game, many in the professional game too. And, you know, the sense is that this is perhaps under-representation of the problem, because Joe Jacobson goes to Jewish clubs and hears from them that there are so many incidents. And he can feel that authorities are overlooking the problem, and he felt this particularly when the FA did not like the Wembley Arch in the colours of Israel immediately after the attacks on Israel.
You know, there has been apologies, and there has been, you know, a new task force put in place, and that I've been involved in, and so there is progress. And maybe it's taken something like this to create that, and all of a sudden now there's a task force in place from the FA that wasn't there before. So there is positives to come out of it somehow. That you know, there is now a means for anti-Semitism to be looked at in a way that it probably wasn't before.
And Joe Jacobson is aware there is a wider problem of racism, in particular Islamophobia, following the Israel-Gaza war, as we've obviously seen many tens of thousands of Palestinian deaths too.
OK. For now, thanks very much indeed. Have you finished your Wagyu beef?
I have finished my Wagyu beef. It was so good.
It was so good. And if you didn't see us in the last hour, check it out on our Twitter feed.
If we could also have that every day, that'd be lovely.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That'd be lovely. Big day, potentially, the United States today. This is the Supreme Court could rule on Colorado's bid to ban Donald Trump from the state's presidential ballot. Colorado's state Supreme Court decided in December that Mr. Trump was disqualified from running due to what it called his incitement of the Capitol riot back in 2021. The former president strongly denies the claims. His lawyers argue the riot didn't amount to an insurrection. Earlier, I spoke to the investigative reporter at Raw Story, Alexandria Jacobson, about the possibility of Trump running.
As we saw in Colorado, they had ruled that President Trump potentially should not be eligible to be on the ballot due to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that says an insurrectionist should not be able to run for office. So given the cases involving Donald Trump's alleged involvement, we will see what their opinion is essentially going to be.
Haiti's declared a state of emergency in an attempt to regain control of the streets after an explosion of violence and a mass prison break. Armed gangs stormed the country's two biggest prisons over the weekend, freeing thousands of killers, kidnappers and other violent criminals. It's a new low in Haiti's descent into chaos and lawlessness. It's estimated that gangs have taken control of 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The conservationist Chris Packham has been given the green light to challenge the government's net zero rollback in the High Court. Mr Packham claims it was unlawful to water down emissions-cutting policies without replacing them with others that aim to meet the UK's targets. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, announced the rollback in September, saying the approach to net zero was imposing unacceptable costs on families. Two women have been charged by police after targeting a bust of Queen Victoria at a museum in Glasgow. The pair, from an activist group called This Is Rigged, can be seen in video posted online pouring jam and porridge on the bust before spray painting a swear word and gluing themselves to the plinth. They were protesting against food insecurity. Motorists are being warned that some budget-friendly insurance policies might not cover them for common claims. The consumer group Which says cut-price policies might appear more attractive in comparison websites, but drivers should read the fine print. Some of the things often not covered include cracked windscreens.
On the 10th of February, a Russian strike on a Ukrainian fuel depot sent millions of gallons of petrol flooding into the streets of Kharkiv. 15 homes were set ablaze, killing entire families. Our international correspondent John Sparks reports now from Kharkiv on the pain and suffering felt by those living through the war.
In Ukraine, another calamity marks the night sky. Another disaster in this war-torn state. On February 10th, the Russians hit a fuel depot in the city of Kharkiv. 1 million gallons of diesel and gasoline poured into the streets, flowing like lava into a nearby neighborhood. 15 homes were destroyed. Tatiana Putetina lived here at number 32 with her son Grigory and his family of 5.
The children were asleep. There were 3 of them, 7, 4 and 10 months old. They just didn't have time to get out, to gather the children.
Tatiana was visiting a relative on the night of the attack, but her son and his wife Olna were caught in the blaze. They'd spent the past 2 years trying to keep their 3 boys safe. Alexei, the oldest, Mikhailo in the middle. Pavlo was still a baby.
They found my son here. This is where he lay. It looks like he was looking for a way out. Here in the bathroom, that's where she was. Olna was holding 2 of the children close to her chest.
This was Tatiana's home until a couple of weeks ago, but the structure is gone, and so is her life as she knows it. How do you come to terms with that? More than 10,000 civilians have been killed since the beginning of the invasion, and more than 500 of those are children. It is the pitiless product of a senseless war.
Of course it's hard. I come here every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I'll come here, walk around the house where they found their bodies. I'll shout, I'll cry, and then I'll leave.
It is a journey that she will continue to make on her own. John Sparks, Sky News in Kharkiv.
Quick look at the weather for you.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Temperatures will slowly rise this week and the weather will settle down a little bit as well. Frosty start for many, some fog patches mainly in the south. That fog will slowly lift during the morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but cloud and rain will spread across Ireland, South Wales and also southwest England.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Pleased to say that Liz is with us this morning. Liz Kendall, Labour MP for Leicester West, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. What would you say to George Galloway if you see him in the tea room?
I won't say anything to him. But what I'll be thinking is that at the next general election, Labour is going to put forward a candidate. We're going to fight to win back Rochdale and give them a candidate who is focused on the issues that matter to them, deeply matter to them, with a proper plan to get this country back on the right track.
So you'll ignore him?
I wouldn't speak to him.
Labour has to accept responsibility for George Galloway being an MP.
I am really sorry to the people of Rochdale that we didn't have a candidate that we could put forward at this by-election. But we will, at the next general election, we will have a candidate who will fight day and night for them and for their futures and the future of this country. That is my promise. That is my promise to the people of Rochdale.
How concerned are you that you might have lost Rochdale even if you had had a candidate?
We lost Rochdale because we didn't have a Labour candidate that we were out there fighting and campaigning for. But you know, Kay, after all the years I've been involved in politics, I have never taken any group of support or any voter for granted, because what I have seen is how things can change. You have to work day and night to convince people who voted for you all their lives and people who have never voted for you, every single vote. And I think this next election will be a real fight, and we're determined to put forward our positive offer about how to build a better Britain for the future.
How concerned are you about allegations of intimidation from Galloway's team?
I am worried about what's happened to many MPs from both sides of the House, the intimidation and threats that people have faced. I don't think that that is right. And if I think about my own constituency, one of the things, and I've talked to you about this before, that I'm worried about is that the need to see people's common humanity, what we have in common, and to try and bring people together. I think there is a real job here for political leadership. And when I see Keir Starmer putting that message forward about what we have in common, that is really, really important for the future.
Yeah, I'm talking particularly about George Galloway, if I may press you on that point, and suggestions that his supporters were intimidating other candidates.
I think any intimidation is wrong. You know, you can have disagreements. I have them all the time, but you can do that in a way that isn't bullying, that isn't threatening, and doesn't have intimidation involved. I think that that is wrong. We need to be able to have robust debate in this country without people feeling that their safety or the safety of their families is under threat.
Looks like the cat that's got the cream there, doesn't he? Now, did the Prime Minister's speech inflame tensions, do you think, on Friday?
I think the point that he was raising about the need for unity and that intimidation and threatening behaviour is wrong. You know, I mean, I've heard it in my own constituency, people who've been really worried about what's happening in the country, the fears that they have. And I think that the Prime Minister and Keir Starmer have been right to say we need unity in this country. Threats and intimidation are wrong. We can't have any part of that in our politics.
Some suggestions that planes may be taking off as early as the end of this month, taking people back to Rwanda, or to Rwanda, forgive me.
I'll believe it when I see it, Kay. I mean, the cost, have you seen the latest cost of this, right? You know, you would save money if you sent people to France, put them up in the Ritz, in the Paris Ritz for 4 years. You'd save money compared to this government. So, you know, forgive me, with all their rhetoric, I'll believe it when I see it.
OK, tell me about Labour's plans to help young people find work.
Well, we are announcing today a big new offer for young people, particularly the 1 in 8 of all young people who are now not in education, employment or training. That is terrible for them, it's terrible for businesses, and it's terrible for our economy as a whole. So alongside our plans to create more good jobs in every part of the country and make work pay, we're going to be offering mental health support in every school to stop those problems taking hold when people are young, 1,000 new careers advisors and good work experience, specialist employment advisors too, and also crucially the chance to get new skills. We've seen under the Conservatives a failed apprenticeship levy. Apprenticeship starts for young people dropping by a third. That's not good for them and it's not good for the country. So we're saying this is our offer. We value you, we will invest in you, and we want to get Britain working again.
Shadow Secretary of State, it's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time. Thank you. So as far as George Galloway is concerned, he is going to take his seat in the House of Commons a little bit later on today. We will see that he has two ministers that, or two MPs, I should say, who are going to be standing next to him. One of them will be Jeremy Corbyn, we're told. The other one, David Davis, originally was thought to be one of his sponsors, but we've subsequently heard, I think I'm right in saying, Mari, that it's not going to be David Davis now.
No, it'll be Peter Bottomley, Father of the House. So he's been MP for the longest period of time, and he's a bit of an elder, as it were, a wise figure in the House of Commons.
Interesting what we were hearing there from Liz Kendall, saying that she would ignore him in the tea room.
Yeah, she wouldn't speak to him, she wouldn't engage with him. I think we'll hear that a lot from Labour. I think Labour want to be as far away as possible from George Galloway and anything associated with him. I think they are very, very, very concerned about the fact that obviously he used to be a Labour MP, and making sure that they keep as much distance between themselves and George Galloway, I think they think will help them. But I do think there might be some nerves behind the scenes. I think you were right to ask, would they have won that by-election if they still had a candidate? Because at the end of the day, the candidate came across on the ballot paper as Labour. Postal votes had already come in.
Absolutely.
And to come fourth behind two independents and a Conservative is a really damning indictment for the Labour Party. I know he wasn't representing Labour by the time they were going to the polls, but nonetheless, as we said, postal votes, and some people may not have realised that. So I think it's really, really interesting, and I think it's one to keep an eye on. I think Labour, they might not acknowledge this, but nonetheless, I think they will be behind the scenes looking at how much their stance on Israel and Gaza has potentially damaged certain sections of their voter base. And there is a worry that maybe the Muslim vote for the Labour Party could have been damaged by their, as far as some people would see, slowness to back a ceasefire.
Yeah, I think, although I think she also had a reasonable point when she was saying they didn't campaign. So
yes, absolutely.
It's very
and
different. And George Galloway was a roaring success, it would seem, in Rochdale. I don't think he's going to be in the House of Commons. I did ask the government minister what he would say to George Galloway if he saw him.
What I can tell you is that we're going to take a balanced approach. We've got to, broadly speaking, set out a path, as the Chancellor said yesterday. We've got to set out a path to a lower tax economy overall over the coming years. But we're only going to do that in a sustainable way and focus on increasing productivity at our public services.
Are you going to cut national insurance?
Look, as I said, I'm not going to get into detailed taxes.
What about income tax?
I can't get into individual taxes. You know, we can play this game, but I can talk to you about the general approach.
I'm thinking about going back to bed today.
Whoops.
Well, talking about the budget there, of course.
That was talking about the budget, yeah. So Bim Afolami was talking about George Galloway, originally what you were referring to, Kay, and he was basically saying it was a bit of a damning indictment for democracy, and he found it quite disappointing. But it was interesting, and I think you were right to push back on the fact that at the end of the day, he might be a divisive character, he might be an offensive character to many, but he is an elected member of the House of Parliament now. Yeah. He is.
He's also for the record, he is a deeply unpleasant human being. I've had the misfortune to be in his company. He's not a nice guy, but he has been diplomatically...
democratically elected. Exactly. And I think that's the issue, is actually he is still, irrespective of how anybody feels about him, he is still there by the fact that he was elected by people. And I think that sometimes... I think it's also important to remember that we need to look at why people felt the need to vote for George Galloway with all that he stands for, with everything he was campaigning on. And I think all political parties need to take a moment and have a look as to why the people of Rochdale felt that was their only choice.
OK.
He got about 60% of the vote. That's not... His majority is not small. I think it's about 5,000-6,000.
Yeah.
It's a very sizable majority for someone who's so divisive. They need to take a look at that and actually take it seriously.
OK, my producer's saying I can't say bad things about him. It's a comment. Actually, he's a really, really lovely guy. And you definitely want him round.
Well, I've never met him, so I have no idea.
There you go.
I take your word.
Special budget coverage on Wednesday here on Sky News. The programme will be presented by Sophie in Westminster, Sarah Jane in Grimsby, Ian King will join from a factory in Ipswich. And if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can listen to Politics at Jack and Sam's looking ahead to the budget, and they'll join me at 8:30 this morning. Now, to what appears to be the ultimate fashion faux pas at Paris Fashion Week, Kim Kardashian was seen with the, here we go, what do you think about this? The Balenciaga tag on her frock. Suggestions that it was a mistake and she'd forgotten to cut it off.
No chance.
No chance, Rooney.
I mean, she looks absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, can you imagine walking out and no one having spotted that tag until she got there? Come on.
I mean, everything is completely and utterly curated from start to finish. Nobody would have missed that. So it's definitely a publicity stunt.
Yeah, certainly is. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. Jack and Sam will be discussing the latest episode of their podcast, focusing on the Chancellor's upcoming budget on Wednesday. Hear about the campaign to drive up childhood vaccinations across England. Plus, a stunning display of the Northern Lights as seen from UK skies. He sat down. What are you doing?
Did you throw it on the floor?
It's a costume change.
God,
Half eight.
Oh, you can't see.
I didn't.
What are you doing?
You can go viral again now.
Oh, can we have the
Can I
headlines?
give you the headlines while you tidy yourself
out?
up? Go and pick it up. Our headlines this morning. The US Vice President Kamala Harris has demanded an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and said Israel isn't doing enough to stop what she called a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. It's the strongest American rebuke yet of Israel's conduct in its war with Hamas. One of England's most high-profile Jewish football players has told Sky News he's become a target for hatred. Wycombe Wanderers captain Joe Jacobson said he's witnessed a rise in anti-Semitism since October the 7th and now needs security to escort him into his club's grounds. Sky News has seen the pain and suffering of people in Kharkiv in Ukraine after a Russian strike set a huge fuel depot ablaze. Entire families were killed. And it's budget week with the Chancellor to deliver it on Wednesday. On the big question of tax cuts, Jeremy Hunt's now saying he hopes to, I quote, show a path in that direction. And the Royal National Lifeboat Institute celebrates its 200th year of saving lives.
Sorted himself out. Politics at Jack and Sam's. Good to see both. Before we go into the podcast in any real detail, talk to me about that intimidation that you had on Friday.
I interviewed George Galloway twice on Friday, the second time at his victory rally, in the aftermath of Rishi Sunak delivering an extraordinary speech on the steps of Downing Street. I happened to be there. I happened to watch a bit of it with George Galloway. And we had an interview where I was putting... It was his victory rally, and I was putting difficult points of what the Prime Minister was saying to him, and he got cross. And as the interview went on, a crowd of his supporters came along, and they were making clear that the questions were unwelcome and cheering his answers and jeering what I was doing. You used the word intimidation. I don't think it was that, Kay. I think
What do you think they were trying to achieve?
Well, I think they have a right to do what they wanted on their ground, and we were there with their invitation. I think we had a right, an obligation to ask the questions that we did, and we had a right to film what we did. And I think it's for viewers to make up their mind what they saw.
I think we've got a clip. Have we? No. I thought we did. It's going very well today. So, what did you think when you saw it?
I thought Sam handled himself very well, to be honest. It can be difficult doing these live broadcasts. I mean, I've never done anything like that, but it looks challenging when people are surrounding you and chanting. But, you know, in the heat of a post-by-election campaign like that, I think it's not surprising that, you know, passions are running high. George Galloway is one of the most combative politicians in our country. He's obviously a very effective speaker, and he likes to put his point across in a certain way, and I thought Sam handled him very well, and Galloway said what he wanted to say, and Sam got all the best quotes of the weekend, and I thought it was good. I enjoyed watching it.
I was chatting to the Minister and the Shadow Minister. One of them said that they would ignore him in the House of Commons. Another one said that they would have nothing to say to him, but not that they would ignore him. He's been struggling to get people to sponsor him. Is that the right word, sponsor?
To introduce him to the Speaker, there are some formalities you're introduced usually by MPs of both sides of the House. It's very hard to ignore George Galloway. A lot of people really dislike what he has to say, but a lot of people acknowledge that how he has to say it is quite something.
He's a great orator, isn't he?
He is a master of using whatever platform it is. And what's interesting is that he knows who he's coming for. And he's not coming for Rishi Sunak. And the cynic of me thinks Rishi Sunak knows that and why he elevated and made him into an almost demagogue figure on the steps of Downing Street on Friday. He's coming for Keir Starmer, the leader of the party that he was once in. And he knows how to punch bruises better than most other MPs in that building. And so Labour want to ignore him. They're going to say they're going to ignore him. But I have a long-standing view, Kay, about politics, that you don't win an argument by not mounting one. Who is actually going to take him on? Who is going to, when he says things about Israel that, you know, pretty much everybody else in the chamber thinks is absolutely unacceptable, who's going to stand up and pick those arguments apart if everybody's sitting on their hands and ignoring him?
I think as well, Kay, you can't ignore a guy who's just been elected by the people of Rochdale to be their MP. The main two parties might not like it, but Labour couldn't even manage to find a candidate they wanted to support, and the Tories guy went on holiday and you know, finished way off the number of votes that Galloway got. So you can't ignore, you know, their democratically elected representative. Whether or not you agree with his views on Gaza, he's there for a reason, and he deserves a voice like all the other MPs in Parliament.
And I'm sure he'll be using it. He'll certainly be a disruptor. I also tried to speak to the government about the budget. Obviously, nothing.
Running scared, I believe, is the word. Frit.
That's why you have to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, we've got all the details anyway. He read it all out on Sunday night, exactly what's coming on Wednesday, more or less. I think they're still hammering out the final details. The big question, as I'm sure you realise, is how much personal tax cuts can Jeremy Hunt afford in a pre-election giveaway? The calculation of the Tories is that they'll get more votes if they cut taxes this week. Now, whether it works out like that is a whole other question, but that's where they're at mentally. And so they're looking for either 1p or 2p cuts, we think, probably to national insurance, possibly to income tax. And that decision is more or less being made right now, I think, and we'll hear it on Wednesday.
Hold your breath. Here we go.
Look, the one thing I'm pretty sure about is that it won't be both. Even if there's money, the feeling at the top of government seems to be that it is neater, cleaner and more impactful to do one. So which will it be of income tax or national insurance? Well, as you say, there's political common sense to income tax because it's more easily understood than national insurance, which could feel a bit like a stealth tax cut, and people weren't clear that the government was getting the credit for the national insurance cuts from last autumn. But it always, the thing about income tax is it also rewards pensioners and it rewards the wealthy a lot more because it doesn't cut off at a certain level of the income distribution on a sliding scale. But for all of that, my feeling is that it's more likely to be national insurance.
What's behind the curtain?
Well,
is it a collection of ties?
It's a secret.
OK.
It's a cabaret stage, and it draws back, and the dancing, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful.
Fantastic, fantastic. But it might have been a returning officer. Also, listening to the podcast, you're suggesting that potentially the planes could go to Rwanda by the end of this month.
It's not impossible. The Rwanda bill, which is creeping through Parliament, has a big week this week. It's in the House of Lords for votes. It's the first time the Lords will have voted to amend the bill. That'll happen today and also on Wednesday. We're expecting the government to lose some of those votes. Then what happens is what's called ping-pong, when it goes from the Lords to the Commons. They keep sending it back at each other. But the expectation is that the bill will probably pass around the 20th of March. And we could see flights, in theory, taking off straight away if the judges then decide that, indeed, the law works and flights can go. I mean, the government are keen to get them off the ground ASAP. Whether it happens that quickly, we don't know for sure, but it's literally possible. We could see them 22nd, 23rd of March, who knows?
And if that were to happen?
The problem is there's just a lot of chatter. Now, the chatter is denied. Right, let's be quite clear. The chatter about...
He missed the important word there. Yeah, I think he was getting to it.
He doesn't want to say it. He can't bring himself to believe that there might be an election around the corner.
You don't think they will either?
I don't think that any Prime Minister losing this badly calls an early election. I think a Prime Minister losing this badly clings on for as long as possible because they'd rather rack up the months and dream of divine intervention, hand of God swooping in, saving them. But
the whole of Westminster is looking at clues. There are key foreign meetings with senior politicians that are just not being locked down and people can't work out why. They're happening, you know, May time, in theory. There are rumours that, you know, protection officers being put on standby for an election, although that could just be precautionary. Other contacts talk of, unanswered calls and meetings not being arranged. And also, I think just Labour have had a more tricky time of it in the last month, and that's hard to ignore. And you looked at Rishi Sunak's performance on Friday night, that felt like he was trying to cut through to the public and rehearse some of those general election arguments. It has always been the case that Rishi Sunak said it was more likely to be the second half of the year. I just wonder, given it's not just us having this conversation, it's everybody I talk to, whether or not Downing Street are going to have to come out fairly soon, if it isn't, as we suspect, May, and it is the back half of the year, and reiterate it ain't happening anytime soon, because the sort of rumour mill has got going again.
The counter-argument to what I just said, Kay, is that we're going to have another summer with lots of people coming across the channel, which will look bad for the government. Through the course of the year, more people will be coming off their fixed-rate mortgages and going on to much more expensive ones, which, of course, they'll be blaming the Tories and Liz Truss for. So there's a chance that you lose more votes there if you wait. And the Reform Party, Nigel Farage is president of that, is gaining in the polls. And if you leave it another 6 months, they might be even higher and the Tories might do even worse. So there is an argument for just getting on with it and doing it on the 2nd of May when we have local elections anyway. As I say, I don't
local
quite
elections might
believe
look
it.
terrible as well.
But, right, that's
But if
absolutely
you're
right.
a career politician and you're likely to lose big whenever the election comes, you
But
may
Rishi
want to
Sunak
be a
isn't-
prime minister.
But Rishi Sunak isn't a career politician, Kay.
What if
He's got options.
Nice job lined up in Silicon Valley, who knows?
OK.
Didn't come from politics, won't go back to politics.
But he does like being in number 10.
Most people like being in number 10, don't they, in the end?
Yeah.
That's what I think. I wouldn't mind.
Quick predictions.
He's saying 2p cut in national insurance and I'll back him to the hilt.
I'm with that guy.
And they're both together on Politics at Jack and Sam's. It's good to see you guys, as always. See you next week. Thank you. Let's talk about the RNLI. It's celebrating its 200th anniversary. Let's get more with Shingy standing by for us in Whitby this morning. Hi, Shingy, tell me more.
Morning, Kay. So in those 2 centuries, so much has changed. We've gone from oar-powered lifeboats being pulled to the shore by horses to pieces of incredibly intricate modern kit like this boat behind me, the Shannon class. But one thing has stayed the same, and that is the dedication that these volunteers have to the cause of saving lives, which you can see in this report here.
For 2 centuries, the RNLI has represented the best of Britain. An army of volunteers saving lives at sea in their spare time. This is footage from 1924 of a team rushing to a rescue in Whitby. 100 years on, change has swept through the shores of this town on the northeast coast. But that lifeboat service is still here, showing the same spirit. We joined the RNLI team here on a training exercise aboard their multi-million-pound Shannon-class vessel, funded entirely by donations. The technology on board is top of the range, but the crew embody an old ethos, one of wanting to help their community.
Come further around now to 300.
Taking part in this mock-up of a man overboard scenario is 21-year-old Max, one of the station's youngest volunteers.
It's pretty busy, so I work 7 till 5 Monday to Friday, so that means I'm on service from 5:30 at night till 5:30 in the morning, plus weekends. It can be quite busy because, like on Friday, for example, I got in the house at 5:30. My tea was on the side warm. As I was about to eat, we got called out, so I had to leave my tea there, throw it to the station, and I got home at about 7 o'clock. So it was a long day, but at the same time, very rewarding.
Teams are now called out to powered boats, paddle boards, and more, while mental health call-outs are more common.
The RNLI started out as fishermen called to save people from shipwrecks. 200 years later, the volunteers are from all walks of life. One thing that has stayed the same, though, is the close connection they have to the communities they serve.
Steady our boat, steady our! Those rescues can be moments of real jeopardy, like this.
You okay?
2 rowers clinging onto their boat, which had capsized on the North Sea. Emma, who was saved that day, is not only grateful to be alive, but determined to give back.
I've now been inspired to actually become a volunteer here at the RNLI, so I'm going to be volunteering as a water safety advisor. And I think now for both myself and Tom and our families, the RNLI, are a big part of our lives. The reason that we are here is because of them.
Her story is like so many others. Lives have not only been touched by this charity, but saved by it, which is why on these shores and across the country, the RNLI continues to matter.
So you get a sense there of the work that the RNLI do here and the gratitude of the community and the people that they help. We're inside the crew room now, and we know that this is one of the oldest lifeboat centres that the RNLI runs across the country. Around 31 people here, the large bulk of whom are volunteers. But this is also a nationwide story, with the RNLI being celebrated in a service in London this afternoon, and a big part of that celebration will be recognising the work of people from all walks of life and all backgrounds who are simply doing what they can to help save people at sea.
Great, thank you. Now, a stunning display of the Northern Lights could be seen from parts of the UK. Overnight sightings were reported across Scotland and even as far down south in Cornwall. This was the view from the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. A new campaign hopes to drive up childhood vaccinations across England. We'll speak to a doctor next. And it's budget week. We'll be talking potential tax cuts with Will.
So it's a comedy improvisation show. So we ask the audience for suggestions and then we make stuff up based on what they say. So they're a part of the show.
I do that for a living.
Yes.
So do we.
So do we.
You do sometimes, I mean, there is sometimes we play a game where we ask people to write down lines of dialogue, and because it's sort of anonymous, sometimes people write down things you think, no, that's not going to be funny. You know.
Filthy thing.
Or if there's a very bad tragic story in the news, you know that's not something that you're going to get any laughs from, or you would want to. But also as well, when you ask people to shout out suggestions, they sometimes shout out things like, you say, could I have a place of work? And they'll say, abattoir. And you go, well, that's not going to, you know, there's not going to be much fun in that. That's part of what I think entertainment can be, is an escape from the real world for a while, a kind of sort of relaxation away from it, a kind of sort of refresher, so that you're not always constantly thinking about what's in the news, because let's face it, the news by its very nature is usually pretty grim.
You constantly feel slightly nervous or excited. It depends how you view it. I think it's exciting, and it slips into nerves if you haven't done a show for a while or if there's somebody in that you particularly want to impress. But mostly it's just exciting. It's a good adrenaline ride.
The first time when I started doing improvised comedy back in the 80s, I did quite a bit of work with Mike Myers, who went to, you know, people we know from Austin Powers and Wayne's World. And he was so fluent at what he did that I remember just looking at him thinking, I can see you doing it, but it still seems impossible. But of course, after a few months of practice and experience, you start to not be as good as him, but you start to be as fluent. The great thing about sort of the improvised comedy thing is, like, you have a comic idea and you do it, and you find out straight away. In comedy, you find out straight away whether it's funny or not because the audience tells you by laughing. You can have a comedy idea, write it down on a piece of paper, hand it to somebody, a TV organisation, not hear anything for about a year, and it comes back with not funny stamped on it. You know, whereas with this, you can immediately get that rapport and that instant reaction.
At the Comedy Store in London.
OK.
Yes.
How long for?
Well, we start on Wednesday, March the 6th, and then we keep going. It's a residency.
You improvise?
So, yeah, we're there every Wednesday. At some point...
And Suki Webster's improv show.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
At some point, we'll take a break, but for now, we're there every Wednesday at the Comedy Store.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Dr. Sonia is with us this morning, talking about vaccinations. What's the problem?
So for the past 10 years now in this country, we've seen a steady drop in vaccination rates amongst children. And this has been really concerning us in the healthcare service. And we've now dropped so vaccine levels have dropped to such a low level in some parts of the country where we no longer have population levels of immunity. And there's risks that then the viruses can spread and that we see outbreaks. We've seen that in the past few years with measles. We're having outbreaks occurring in some parts of the country. And last week, there were over 60 cases of measles in just 1 week. And this is really, really worrying because the vaccines are really safe and they're an effective way of preventing children getting these conditions. And, what's, I think, really frustrating and sad about something like measles is that we don't have treatment for it. So potentially children can become very unwell if they get the virus. And, getting children vaccinated to stop them getting that is really, really important.
I thought we said in the 90s that we'd eradicated measles.
We had eradicated measles and other conditions as well, things like smallpox, polio, we've effectively eradicated due to the success of vaccination programmes. We were measles-free up until 2016 in this country, which shows, again, the success of the vaccination programme. But due to the fact that in recent years, more and more people are not getting their kids vaccinated, and there's some parts of the country where you have 1 in 4 children who are not fully vaccinated, then that then allows the virus to spread and outbreaks occur, which is really, really worrying. It's worrying for those children who are unvaccinated, but also worrying as well for other people in communities who can't be vaccinated because they're too young or because they have other health conditions. So it puts them at risk as well.
Okay. So there are some concerns about the measles vaccination in some sections of society, but there are alternatives, aren't there? You'll explain this much better than I can.
Yeah, so I think there's multiple factors as to why we've seen the vaccination rates drop. We know that there's, in some communities there are concerns that the vaccines contain pork or products of pork, but actually there are alternatives that don't contain pork products. So you can request that when you go to your GP to make sure that you have a vaccine that doesn't contain any pork products. We also know that there may be, amongst some people, may be concerns about the safety of the vaccines. We know that in social media there is sometimes, just to be frank, complete nonsense being spread about those vaccines. So in those cases, it's really important those families are able to speak to a healthcare professional to talk about their concerns, because in my experience, all parents want to do the best for their children. So if we're able to have those conversations to reassure parents, then they can get their vaccines done. But we also know that vaccine rates tend to be lower in areas of poverty or social deprivation. And with things like the MMR vaccine, actually for the first vaccine, coverage is quite good, but then we see a drop-off for families getting the second vaccine. Okay. So that suggests less of a problem of vaccine hesitancy, but more of a problem of maybe knowledge about when to get the vaccine or when it's needed, or even simple things of difficulties getting that GP appointment or getting the time off work to take your kid to get the vaccine done.
Yeah, and in a case of do as I say, not as I do, I have not had my flu vaccine. Yeah. I'm a bad person, I know.
You're not a bad person. And with childhood vaccinations, they start at 8 weeks old and they go all up until the age of 14. And then again, you'll be needing vaccines as you get later on in life. And we're not expecting you or anyone to know exactly what vaccine they need when. But if you are concerned about, and you will be contacted by your GP when you do need vaccines, but if you're concerned that your kid hasn't been up to date with their vaccine, you can contact your GP. And it's also really important that when your child is born, that you register them with the GP so we can contact you to make sure that you get the vaccines you need.
Okay, and measles can be very, very damaging.
Measles can cause lifelong disabilities. It also can be deadly in some children, but also other conditions as well. We're seeing drop in vaccines across the board for children, and conditions that we'd eradicated in this country like polio and smallpox. Potentially we could see a resurgence of conditions that we thought we'd eradicated if we're not getting our children vaccinated.
It's good to see you, Dr. Sonia. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, let's talk more about the budget. Should we on Wednesday? We may as well talk about it, Will, because the politicians won't.
Well, exactly. Do you know what, though? I think Sam's out and about later. He's trying to track down the Chancellor to see if we can get anything more out of him. So we'll, of course, have that when it takes place later this morning. But as you said, whether you're talking to the Economic Secretary, to the Treasury earlier, or Trevor's attempts to get anything out of the Chancellor yesterday, we don't get much detail. What I do think is interesting is how much of the focus on what is being discussed and leaked and rumoured is short-term cyclical measures as opposed to long-term structural economic reforms which the country so desperately needs. And I think for that, by the way, we just need a new parliament, a new mandate and a fresh government. Whatever political persuasion the government is from, it seems like at the moment the debate is just about what might appeal to the base, to voters in the short term. And I'm not sure anything that we're discussing is really going to solve the problems that are facing the economy right now.
Yeah, you heard Sam, though, didn't you? And I'm not sure if you've listened to the podcast yet, but he's saying 2-point cuts in national insurance payments.
Which exactly is what we had in the autumn statement, from 12 to 10, take it down to 8. To credit the government and Chancellor on that, at least that is a slightly progressive measure. It speaks to the principles he's often spoken about, as tax should only be paid when you've done well, rather than it just being an arbitrary upfront tax. And if he was being very political, he could spend that perhaps more on increasing the thresholds for the higher rates of tax or lowering the tax rates. And instead he is focusing on NIC, or so it seems. We'll have to wait and see, I guess.
We will. We'll see you shortly. Thank you. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go.
To fly
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Temperatures slowly rising this week and the weather will settle down a little bit as well. Frosty start. Some fog patches, mainly in the south. The fog will slowly lift during the morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but cloud and rain will spread across Ireland, South Wales and also southwest England. It's going to be wet for Shetland.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Quick look at some of the papers for you. What's caught your eye?
Well, I wanted to talk about the front page of the Daily Mail. It's really depressing, but not actually new. Sky News reported on this back in December last year, and this is all about this kind of cash for care job scandal that the Daily Mail are reporting on. They've done this undercover investigation where essentially people are being brought over from different countries all over the world to fill the care shortage, essentially.
Okay.
But they're being scammed, so they're being charged, you know, £9,000, £20,000 for someone to help them find a job, and then they're being treated appallingly and exploited. It's awful. It's awful. Okay.
What about you?
The front page of the Times, this remarkable situation that German military officers were having a conversation not via their secure line, but via effectively a common workplace platform, and the Russians managed to capture 40 minutes worth of conversation, detailing about how British operatives are working in Ukraine, detailing deals to potentially send weapons back and forth. And you just think, you know, we're all trying to be good with our kind of digital security. You'd hope that these guys were as well.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? You two have gone for heavy-duty stories. I've gone for the front page of The Sun. And here it is, the story there, Kate's big bother, because her uncle is going into Big Brother house tonight.
Gosh.
And they are very concerned, the family, that he is going to start spilling the beans about all sorts of things, not least her recovery. She's still recovering. We haven't seen her since she went into hospital. But also the situation with Harry, etc., etc.
It could be a blockbuster Big Brother.
Yeah, they asked me to do Big Brother.
Did they?
Yeah.
Why did you say no?
Why do you think?
Oh, come on, it would have been fun, Kay.
I was asked when I was a farmer back in 2008 or something as well. There was a vegan in the house at the same time, and I think they wanted to see how that went.
Ah, right. OK, you said no as well.
I also said no.
Yeah. Would you say yes?
I don't know, Kay.
No, you'd say no. We would not let you. We'll see you in just a few moments' time here on Sky. morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. Coming up on the programme for you, talking about a German intelligence leak that's apparently exposed British operations in Ukraine.
Also, the strongest call yet from the United States for a ceasefire in Gaza.
And George Galloway is expected in Parliament this morning. What kind of reception will he get?
Monday, 4th of March. Russia summons the German ambassador in Moscow after details of British and Western operations in Ukraine were apparently leaked and intercepted. Also this morning, the US Vice President Kamala Harris demands an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and insists that Israel must allow more aid in. Anti-Semitism in football. One of England's most high-profile Jewish players tells Sky News how he became a target of hatred. Dancers in the Sky, the Northern Lights, put on an amazing show from Cornwall to the Hebrides.
I am sailing home again, across the sea.
Still sailing and still saving lives after 200 years, the RNLI celebrates its anniversary.
To be near you, to be free.
Morning, everybody. Details are emerging of an intelligence leak by Germany that's led to Russia learning about classified British operations in Ukraine. Let's get more, should we? Adam standing by for us in Brussels. Hi, Adam. Tell us more.
Yeah, this is a potentially very embarrassing, potentially quite damaging series of leaks. Ultimately, what it is Russia Today broadcasting a long conversation between very senior German military officials, a 38-minute conference call, apparently held on commercially available software, with one of them actually dialing in from a hotel room instead of encrypted, secure software. And they're talking about the thorny issue of supplying cruise missiles to Ukraine. Thorny because at the moment the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has fought shy of actually approving this supply. That's something these generals talk about. But within this conversation, they also refer to British personnel being on the ground in Ukraine. Now, this is actually something that Scholz himself mentioned a few days ago, said that British and French were in Ukraine, something that caused fury, I think, between the British and the French, and it's really caused something of a dividing line. There are those within British and French intelligence who think that the Germans really are a weak link in the process, that their intelligence has been infiltrated by the Russians, and that will give further fury to that debate. Now, Boris Pistorius, the German defence minister, came out yesterday referring to this, said that it was part of what he said was a disinformation and hybrid warfare by Russia. He said it does not mean a green light was now being given to send missiles to Ukraine. This question of sending missiles is really damaging the ruling coalition in Germany. It's about division, he said, also suggesting that it was no coincidence that this leak came shortly after the funeral of Alexei Navalny. But there will be those who say, well, it may be embarrassing, but it's not necessarily disinformation if it is simply a recording of a conversation that, by the way, you should have made more secure. It is certainly embarrassing. It certainly points to more confirmation of British troops being on the ground. It is worth saying that the Ministry of Defence has refused to comment so far.
OK, for now, thank you. Talking at 9:30 with Tobias Elwood, former chair of the Defence Select Committee, former Defence Minister. That to come in just a few moments. Meantime, the United States has intensified its call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, with humanitarian crisis spiralling and aid agencies warning that people are starving. Let's get more with Alistair standing by in Jerusalem for us. What difference, what impact will her words have where you are? Alistair, good morning.
Good morning. Well, we know there's been a lot of growing frustration in America about the conduct of the war in Gaza, particularly relating to what America perceives to be a lack of humanitarian aid getting into the Gaza Strip, but also a push for a new ceasefire and hostage release deal. Now, Kamala Harris is normally put in the role of bad cop, if you like, expressing things in public that you might have the US President and the US Secretary of State saying to the Israelis in private. But the fact that she's come out and said this, and in such strong terms, I think we can assume it does reflect the inner thinkings of the Oval Office.
In the strongest rebuke of Israel by the US so far, the Vice President Kamala Harris has said that there must be an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
I will repeat, the threat of Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated. And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks.
The Vice President's comments represent a hardening of tone from the White House as Ramadan approaches. The framework for a deal has been in place for some time now, but the humanitarian situation is spiraling, and aid organizations warn that people in Gaza are starving. Over the weekend, the US carried out its first aid drop of 38,000 meals.
The Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses. They must open new border crossings.
There are thought to be 134 hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. Hamas is demanding the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prisons in exchange. Something that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has so far described as delusional. The two sides remain divided and are yet to find common ground, but talks are continuing in Cairo this week.
Hamas have sent a delegation to those talks in Cairo. As we understand it, the Israelis have not yet done so. They have been demanding some information from Hamas that they say they haven't yet received, and so therefore they won't send a delegation until they get that information. Some of that information we're talking about is the status of the hostages inside Gaza, whether they're alive or dead. Having said that, the framework for a deal has been agreed for a number of weeks now, the big sort of building blocks, if you like, and there seems to be agreement on that. What's happening in Cairo is quite low level but very important technical talks. I think we can sometimes be guilty of thinking that these things are just a case of agreeing a length, a duration, how many people are going to be released, et cetera, but there is a lot of nitty-gritty for the mediating teams and the two sides to work through, and that is what's happening at the moment. So there is still a hope that this ceasefire deal can happen and happen before Ramadan, but you can never account for either Hamas or Israel coming back at the last moment with fresh demands.
OK. Alistair, for now, thank you. Rest of the news now with Gareth.
The US Supreme Court could rule today on Colorado's bid to ban Donald Trump from the state's presidential ballot. Colorado's state Supreme Court decided in December that Mr. Trump was disqualified from running due to what it called his incitement of the Capitol riot in 2021. The former president strongly denies the claims. His lawyers argue the riot didn't amount to an insurrection. Earlier, I spoke to the investigative reporter at Raw Story, Alexandria Jacobson, about the possibility of Donald Trump running.
As we saw in Colorado, they had ruled that President Trump potentially should not be eligible to be on the ballot due to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that says an insurrectionist should not be able to run for office. So given the cases involving Donald Trump's alleged involvement, we will see what their opinion is essentially going to be.
Haiti has declared a state of emergency in an attempt to regain control of the streets after an explosion of violence and mass prison break. Armed gangs stormed the country's two biggest prisons over the weekend, freeing thousands of killers, kidnappers and other violent criminals. It's a new low in Haiti's descent into chaos and lawlessness. It's estimated the gangs have taken control of 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The conservationist Chris Packham has been given the green light to challenge the government's net zero rollback in the High Court. Mr Packham claims it was unlawful to water down emissions-cutting policies without replacing them with others that aim to meet the UK's targets. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced the rollback into September, saying the approach to net zero was imposing unacceptable costs on families. 2 women have been charged by police after targeting a bust of Queen Victoria in a museum in Glasgow. The pair, from an activist group called This Is Rigged, can be seen in video posted online, pouring jam and porridge on the bust before spray painting a swear word and gluing themselves to the plinth. They were protesting against food insecurity. Motorists are being warned that some budget-friendly insurance policies might not cover common claims. The consumer group Which says cut-price policies might appear more attractive on comparison websites, but drivers should read the fine print. Some of the things often not included including cracked windscreens.
Let's talk about one of England's most high-profile Jewish players, spoken to us about how he has become a target for hatred. Morning.
Yeah, good morning. This is Joe Jacobson. He's the Wycombe Wanderers captain, one of the few British Jews to play football professionally. It was already quite a challenging environment. He didn't feel for years that football paid enough attention to anti-Jewish hatred. And it's become even more challenging in the environment following the October the 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. Now, Jacobson isn't someone who's posting all the time about the fallout. He's actually only commented once on X, and that was to denounce the tone of some of the pro-Palestinian protests, and the response that he faced was indeed attempts to get him thrown off the team.
The club got sent some emails and letters demanding I apologise, demanding that if I didn't, they would barricade the gates at Adams Park on a match day. There was some plainclothes security that were kind of watching out and looking for anything, and fortunately there was nothing happened. But you know, I'm just going to a place of work and there's people worried about something that might happen, and that can't be right.
Joe Jacobson decided to speak out to bring attention and light onto this problem. And we've also obtained some data from Kick It Out, which monitors discrimination issues in football. And they found a 5-fold increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the first half of this season compared to last year. And that's a lot of fan-on-fan instances in the professional game in particular, 20 instances. Indeed, some of these numbers might just be a snapshot because they're not assessing and gathering all the data. And in the grassroots game, we've seen some Jewish teams face oppositions refusing to play them during this campaign, as well as anti-Jewish hatred. And there has been a challenge, which Joe Jacobson explained to me, getting the authorities to pay enough attention. And he believes this was brought into light when Wembley did not light the arch in solidarity with Israel immediately following those attacks in October.
You know, there has been apologies and there has been, you know, a new task force put in place and that I've been involved in. And so there is progress. And maybe it's taken something like this to create that, and all of a sudden now there's a task force in place from the FA that wasn't there before. So there is positives to come out of it somehow. That you know, there is now a means for anti-Semitism to be looked at in a way that it probably wasn't before.
Joe Jacobson, who's marking 10 years playing for Wycombe. In fact, while we were doing the interview, a poster was received by the League One club. Again, that was targeting hatred at him, just showing the scale of the problem, obviously reflecting issues in wider society where there has been the rise in anti-Semitic instances as well as Islamophobia since the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
OK, for now, thank you. Thanks very much. Rochdale's new MP, George Galloway, expected in Parliament this morning. Here's what Treasury Minister Bim Afolami said earlier. Talk to me about how excited you might be about meeting George Galloway in the House of Commons.
OK, I'm not that excited about that. Look, I think it was an appalling spectacle, really, for our democracy, what happened in Rochdale. But, you know, he has rights. He's been elected by the people of Rochdale.
Why do you say... Well, I mean, it was a democratic election.
Yes, it was.
How much more thrilled are Labour that he's going to be in the chamber?
Yeah, I think Labour is going to be dreading this day. It's a really interesting dynamic where obviously technically a former Labour MP, but now very much nothing to do with the Labour Party. And the Labour Party are very, very keen to put a lot of distance between themselves and George Galloway and everything he stands for as far as they're concerned. So We had Liz Kendall on this programme just earlier this morning saying she wouldn't even speak to him if she saw him in the tea room in Parliament, for instance. I think we might have a clip of that, actually. We can see how she reacted to it.
We're going to fight to win back Rochdale and give them a candidate who is focused on the issues that matter to them, deeply matter to them, with a proper plan to get this country back on the right track.
So you'll ignore him?
I wouldn't speak to him.
Labour has to accept responsibility for George Galloway being an MP.
I am really sorry to the people of Rochdale that we didn't have a candidate that we could put forward at this by-election. But we will, at the next general election, we will have a candidate who will fight day and night for them and for their futures and the future of this country. That is my promise.
I asked her what she would do in the tea rooms if she saw him.
Exactly, yeah, and she essentially said she wouldn't speak to him, she wouldn't acknowledge him. So I think it's difficult for the Labour Party because I think, irrespective of the fact that they didn't actually have a candidate in the end in this by-election, they will need to confront the very uncomfortable truth. That is, there's a possibility they could have still lost that by-election. And I think lots of people say, oh, it was a shoo-in for Labour. Had they had a candidate, it wouldn't have been a problem. But they came fourth. George Galloway got 60% of the vote. 2 independents came first before the Tories and then the Labour that's no longer Labour. Postal votes were already in. There is a possibility. The Labour Party needs to acknowledge there's a possibility they could have lost that by-election.
They did say they weren't campaigning.
They weren't campaigning.
And it was a low turnout.
It was a low turnout.
Just before anybody says that we're not being balanced.
Exactly, and that is absolutely right, and people need to take that into account. But nonetheless, I think Labour will be looking at that by-election and realising, as they often say, they shouldn't be complacent in an election, but I think it's a potential danger that some voters don't feel their stance on a ceasefire in Gaza is appealing to them, and that's where the danger lies. It doesn't mean they're going to lose an election, but it is something they should pay attention to. It doesn't mean nothing.
Yeah, I keep saying that as things stand at the moment, I don't think it's going to be the whitewash that people think it may be, but we'll see.
Polls always
I've been wrong before.
They always get tighter closer to
a lot.
election, don't they?
Yes, they do. Let's see. Thanks very much, Mary. Thank you. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Temperatures slowly rising this week. The weather will settle down a little bit as well. Frosty start for many, some fog patches, mainly in the south. That fog will slowly lift during the morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but cloud and rain will spread across Ireland, South Wales and also southwest England. It's also going to be wet for Shetland.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. We have a very young, excited little guest joining us.
Hey guys, it's us, Mary Kate. I'm Ben. Just letting you guys know that this week is Lymphedema Awareness Week, and we're heading to London today to appear on the Kay Burley show on Sky News. So everyone make sure you tune in at 9:20 on Monday the 4th of March, and we're going to take you along with us.
you might not know this, but it's Lymphoedema Awareness Week, condition which causes severe swelling, affects 200,000 people across the UK, including this young lady and her brother. They've travelled all the way from Northern Ireland to be here. Mary-Kate Tierney. Hello.
Hi.
Introduce your brother. What's your name?
Ben.
Ben. And Mum's here as well.
Yeah, I'm Cheryl. Nice to meet you.
It's nice to see you all. Tell me about it.
So lymphedema is when your lymph nodes in part of your body don't work properly, and so the lymph nodes move swelling around the body, and they can't do that, so the swelling gets stuck, and so the fluid gets stuck and causes swelling.
Okay, and what impact does it have on you, young man?
It's just like a normal day in the life now. Sometimes I can't walk properly, and sometimes my leg gets really tired easily.
You have it in both your legs and feet, don't you?
Yeah.
So tell me a bit more about the condition, Mum.
So as Mary-Kate said, whenever the lymphatic system fails to work properly, the fluid that's transported around the body gets stuck in that area, causes extensive swelling, and in Mary-Kate and Ben's case, it's in both legs and feet. And it can be really difficult to manage for them, but we've struggled on, and it's now just part of our normal day-to-day life, and we're trying to make sure that allers know that there's help out there for it, and they can get on with things, and it can be a positive outcome.
So what impact does it have on you, Mary-Kate?
So it can get sore, and it can get tired very easily. Yeah. And my legs can feel heavy, or they can feel like they're gonna.
And can you still do sports and things like that?
Yeah.
What do you do?
I go to my youth club every night.
Do you?
Yeah.
Fantastic. And what about you, young man?
I go to the same youth club every night, and I play football too.
And plays football. So we just have to put lots of extra measures in place to make sure that their legs are safe. They're at very high risk of infection because the skin's stretched and the immune system's compromised. But we can once we have the good support and put loads of measures in place, they can do everything else that everybody else does.
That's amazing. You've come all the way from Northern Ireland to tell us all about it, haven't you? Yeah. And do your friends have to make any allowances for you? Do you sometimes tell them that you're a bit...
Yeah, sometimes if we were out, I would say to them, I'm a bit sore, can you walk a bit slower or something?
Right. Sometimes you have to use a wheelchair, do you?
Yeah.
What about you, young man? You don't say... I bet you're really chattery when you're not on the telly, aren't you? I bet you can't get a word in X-rays, can you?
Yeah, and his friends are very supportive as well, and you know, we're very lucky. We have a great lymphedema service back home that have provided amazing support, and we have great support from the Lymphedema Support Network and the British Lymphology Society. There are charities out there, and some people just don't even know that they exist. So we've utilised a lot of their help to help Mary-Kate and Ben get to where we are now, and we have great support from a company like Essity as well. It's fantastic. So
fantastic. Now, coming all this way, obviously we thought we'd have one or two surprises for you. Do you know what's happening later on?
No.
No, OK. Well, I won't spoil that surprise for
Okay.
you, but we have got a surprise for you later on, which we organised for you yesterday. But I've got this surprise for you now, young lady. Look at this, both of you. Mary-Kate and Ben, Courage Award.
Wow.
Look at that.
Thank you.
How
so much.
amazing is that?
Thank you very much.
So do you think you might be able to take this back with you and not break it?
We can share.
Wow, thank
Well,
you
it's got
so
a lovely
much.
little box and everything. So that's to recognise just how brave you are with your condition.
Wow.
They are. We're very proud. They're very brave.
Look, you've got both very cool. Bit shocked.
That was a big surprise.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, wait until you see what your surprise is later on. You can. Let me give you a clue. You will be able to wave to us when you're there. I know I'm not telling you. I'm not going to tell you any more. But when you get on it, you'll enjoy it.
Wow. Thank you
You'll be able
so
to see
much.
us and Buckingham Palace. I'm not telling you anymore. That's it. That's it. That's it. It's good to see you. Thank you. And thank you for your video. That was so good. I'm going to give you that box for that as well. So you look after it, put it on the mantelpiece when you get home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Brilliant.
for coming in, Mum. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Meantime, let me tell you about the 200th anniversary of the RNLI. Shingy has travelled to Whitby with more.
For 2 centuries, the RNLI has represented the best of Britain, an army of volunteers saving lives at sea in their spare time. This is footage from 1924 of a team rushing to a rescue in Whitby. 100 years on, change has swept through the shores of this town on the northeast coast. But that lifeboat service is still here, showing the same spirit. We joined the RNLI team here on a training exercise aboard their multi-million-pound Shannon-class vessel, funded entirely by donations. The technology on board is top of the range, but the crew embody an old ethos, one of wanting to help their community.
Come further around now to 300.
Taking part in this mock-up of a man overboard scenario is 21-year-old Max, one of the station's youngest volunteers.
It's pretty busy, so I work 7 till 5 Monday to Friday, so that means I'm on service from 5:30 at night till 5:30 in the morning, plus weekends. It can be quite busy because, like on Friday, for example, I got in the house at 5:30. My tea was on the side warm. As I was about to eat, we got called out, so I had to leave my tea there, straight to the station, and I got home at about 7 o'clock. So it was a long day, but at the same time, very rewarding.
Teams are now called out to powered boats, paddleboards, and more, while mental health call-outs are more common.
The RNLI started out as fishermen called to save people from shipwrecks. 200 years later, the volunteers are from all walks of life. One thing that has stayed the same, though, is the close connection they have to the communities they serve.
There they are, boats, there they are.
Those rescues can be moments of real jeopardy, like this.
You okay?
2 rowers clinging onto their boat, which had capsized on the North Sea. Emma, who was saved that day, is not only grateful to be alive, but determined to give back.
I've now been inspired to actually become a volunteer here at the RNLI, so I'm going to be volunteering as a water safety advisor. And I think now for both myself and Tom and our families, the RNLI, are a big part of our lives. The reason that we are here is because of them.
Her story is like so many others. Lives have not only been touched by this charity, but saved by it, which is why on these shores and across the country, the RNLI continues to matter. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Whitby.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you, a stunning display of the Northern Lights as seen from UK skies. Tobias Ellwood is here to talk about a potential security leak. We'll talk about it in just a second after the top stories.
The top stories this morning, yes. Let's give you more of those. We'll start with Russia summoning the German ambassador in Moscow after details of British and Western operations in Ukraine were apparently leaked and intercepted. The US Vice President Kamala Harris has demanded an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and said Israel isn't doing enough to stop what she called a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. It's the strongest American rebuke yet of Israel's conduct in its war with Hamas. One of England's most high-profile Jewish football players has told Sky News he's become a target for hatred. Wycombe Wanderers captain Joe Jacobson says he's witnessed a rise in anti-Semitism since the October the 7th attacks on Israel and now needs security to escort him into his club's grounds. Sky News has seen the pain and suffering of people in Kharkiv in Ukraine after a Russian strike set a huge fuel depot ablaze. Entire families were killed. It's budget week with the Chancellor to deliver it on Wednesday on the big question of tax cuts. Jeremy Hunt is now saying he hopes to, I quote, show a path in that direction.
OK, let's talk about what is going on, should we, as far as a potential security leak is concerned. Tobias Ellwood, former chair of the Defence Select Committee, former Defence Minister, is with us. Hi. What's your understanding?
Yes, this is a major breakdown, I think, in the utility of secure communications. Russia's intercepted this and they've leaked it. And they've done so to sow political discord. What it's illuminated is the difference of views there are between senior German military that want to send those important long-range missiles to Ukraine and Olaf Scholz that actually is not interested in doing this. We in Britain have made it really clear that it's not just right to support Ukraine, but it's in our own interest as well because of the European security. We've taken the British nation with us as we offer missiles, as we offer the training to Ukrainian troops and so forth. That's not been happening in Germany. So Olaf Scholz, who's got local elections, regional elections taking place, is selling peace. That's what he's doing, putting his own politics before the security of the continent. If Putin is able to claim any sort of victory, then that's dangerous for all of Europe. He's becoming more powerful than Stalin. And that penny hasn't dropped in Germany. This is still seen as a Ukrainian war. And so what this has exposed is that those tensions between the two countries. But yes, big questions. There's an investigation now taking place in Germany, and I'm sure there'll be discussions in the diplomatic corridors between Britain and Germany in the next few days.
But how can the security breach happen?
It shouldn't have happened. This is the clear answer to that. You should not be having discussions by the head of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, on such discussions, not least about what Germany wants to do, but then touching on some of the British involvement as well. That's a complete no-no indeed. Russia is known to have infiltrated or certainly be very open or has been more forward in tapping into what Germany has been thinking than compared with other nations indeed. They need to upgrade their security systems. Good that they're stepping forward. You know, give him his due. Olaf Scholz, after the invasion, had this whole Zeitenwende change, you know, upgrading Germany's defense posture, recognizing as the biggest economy in Europe, they need to do their bit for security as well. But their hesitation not to support Ukraine with those Taurus missiles is hugely exposed here. How this plays out in Germany is then very, very important indeed.
Meantime, China appears to be stepping forward again to offer to negotiate with peace talks. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, really interesting that usually it's the United Nations that hold these, or Britain and America. Now China is wading in, using its influence to try and bring people around the table. It shows how the geopolitical influences around the world are changing indeed. Goes back to what I said about Putin, is that Putin knows that China has got its back, and therefore that's why it's being ever more assertive in Eastern Europe. So it's becoming apparent in Britain, very much so, that this is what Putin's longer-term intentions are. That's why we need to support Ukraine. When I was there last weekend, though, it does feel that the tide could be turning against Ukraine unless America provides that $60 billion package of support, unless Germany puts forward more of its weapons and missile systems. Britain, as I say, has done brilliantly in making sure that we provide the assets that we need, but we need other nations to do so too.
In the end, it always comes down, though, to peace talks, doesn't it? That both sides around the table. It looks as though Ukraine still doesn't want to do that, still not ready for that.
It doesn't want to, because then you end up with a sovereign state with a massive chunk of it belonging to Russia. And what does that tell the international community or any authoritarian state? That if you hang out long enough, if you attack another country, the West will then eventually give up. They will lose interest in supporting the democracy. That's why the next few months are absolutely so critical. Ukraine could win. They don't need extra personnel. They don't need boots on the ground. They've got the people that they need. It's the equipment they're short of. They're short of artillery shells. 5-to-1 is the ratio that they're short of. The F-16s haven't arrived yet. And those Taurus missiles, along with Storm Shadows, ATACMS from the United States as well. Let's give Ukraine the equipment they need, and they can then complete the job.
Running out of time, because if Trump wins the election, it's a very different story.
That's a whole nother question as well, which, again, underlines the importance of us expediting our support for Ukraine.
OK, it's always great to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. You might want to comment on this, actually, just before I let you go. Have a look at this.
How are you feeling?
This is an early shift.
How you feeling, Mr. Galloway?
Nice to see you again. I'm feeling good, thank you. The sun is shining.
What's it like to be back?
Well, I'll tell you once I've been inside. I always loved the building. The people in it, not quite so much.
Yeah, his arrival in the House of Commons, his win on Thursday, was one of the reasons why the Prime Minister made his important intervention about where our democracy is going, the challenges that's taking place, our ability to conduct debate in public. It was a democratic vote, but now listen to how he won that. He plays on anger, he plays on hate, he plays on fear. He didn't offer any solutions whatsoever. Then he's going to now bring that to the House of Commons. So he won't allow us to then advance forward. We want that ceasefire ultimately in Gaza and Israel. The stepping stones to get there are important to lay out as well. But he's just going to, I think, incite division, and that isn't healthy for a democracy.
Will you sit next to him in the tea rooms?
The tea rooms are conveniently distanced. One party sits with one. I'll be interested as to where he sits in the tea rooms, because it's already laid out from a party perspective. I suspect we won't even see him in the tea rooms himself.
OK, you're dodging that question. Will you chat to him?
Well, you have to talk to absolutely everybody, but when I say chat...
Because Labour said that they would ignore him.
Well, you can ignore him, or you can stand up to him. You can actually have the courage to then make your case. If you don't stand up to these people, then they continue promoting their perspective, and they then could potentially win the argument, or indeed persuade others to support what they're thinking. That cannot be right. Good people must step forward. We must protect British democracy. It's gone through a very dark chapter in the last couple of months, and that's very, very dangerous indeed. We're an exemplar around the world as to how we do things, but the last couple of months has been difficult. That's why the Prime Minister made that important intervention.
It's always great to see you, as I said. Thanks for hanging around for that. Much appreciated. Wilf is standing by for us. Hi, Wilf. I don't think he's going to have many friends in the House of Commons, if I'm honest. Maybe a handful.
Well, exactly. But I think, you know, as you rightly said, it was a democratic vote. We've got to see how things play out. I don't think it can be a given that he will incite division until we actually witness that in Parliament. And I'm sure people will give him that chance. Interesting timing-wise as well to focus, as only very briefly, I acknowledge it wasn't the centrepiece of what he said about Tobias Ellwood there said about calling for a ceasefire, because, of course, that is something that the parties have sort of shifted their position on, and the Vice President of the United States, obviously, in a high-profile way, called for as well. So we'll see if there's actually, oddly, a little bit of consensus in the short term around that issue. But it's going to be one to watch. As you said, that was him arriving, obviously, outside of the Westminster estate moments ago. And, of course, it'll be interesting to watch the pictures of him inside the chamber today and how all of that goes down.
It certainly will, and we'll do that with you coming up. Thanks very much, Will. Thank you. Prime Minister warned on Friday of an extremist threat to democracy, saying pro-Palestinian protests have descended into intimidation. Chris Hobbs is a former Metropolitan Police officer. He's with us now. It's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. What did you make of what the Prime Minister had to say?
I think there's problems. There are issues. I think most of the issues, to be quite honest, are away from the protests. I know protests that can be intimidatory, but in terms of policing these protests, I've been, I don't know what you've been told, but I've been out observing most of them.
Yes.
So I've seen most of them in action. And to be quite honest, most of the people on there are quite law-abiding, and as the Prime Minister has said, and Jeremy Hunt, are peaceful. What you have are pockets within the protest of people who maybe hold extreme views. In terms of disorder, there hasn't been a lot. If you go back to 2021, when there was another crisis in the Middle East, protests at the Israeli embassy meant police officers were being pelted with bricks, bottles, concrete. They anticipated the worst on this occasion, and it hasn't happened. What I think is really concerning police is what is going on more away from the protests. On these protests, you do get Jewish groups. So you get maybe trade unionists, and they're quite sizable. You also get a group of very Orthodox Jews who are not very popular amongst the Jewish community, but who dress in an Orthodox fashion. And they say they're against Zionism and they're against Israel, but for Judaism. So you've got a bit of a mix. You've also got lots of children, babies in prams, toddlers. And if you ban the march, there's a very real danger that you could get 1,000, 10,000 maybe turn up anyway. And then possibly you've got the sort of ugly confrontation that we've not really seen. What happens at these protests tends to be everyone goes out, marches, listens to the speeches.
Goes home.
Then most go home, but leaves behind a rump of mainly young people, youth, who then coalesce together, like to go on a walkabout, like to chant, like to perhaps push things a little bit, and that's when the police tend to come out in numbers, sometimes in riot gear, just in case, don't push us too far. But in terms of serious disorder, not a lot. In terms of arrests, 200 arrests. So it's not as if everyone gets away with everything. That's not including the arrests that were made on November the 11th with the counter-protesters. The football lads turned up. So in terms of the protests and disorder, I can appreciate, having gone to a school that was 50% Jewish in East London, the feelings of the Jewish community, and they have to be protected.
What happens? How do you just continue to allow the marches to carry on?
Well, it's very difficult, isn't it? If you ban them, as I say, then you've got the possibility of they will happen anyway, and then you've got the police decision what to do next. We don't use tear gas, we don't use water cannon. How do we disperse them? Are they really that much of a problem? Yes, they cause problems to traffic. Yes, if you're away from them and you see the flags and the chanting, and that chant in particular from the river to the sea is particularly upsetting to people in the Jewish community, but has got multiple meanings. So if you actually took that to court, and I don't think there's been an arrest for it yet.
The police have said that, yeah, that it's tricky to
There's so many
arrest.
interpretations.
Yeah.
Some say it's the land of milk and honey. This is what we want, where Jews, Christians, Muslims can all be free to live together and worship in their own way. Of course, you've got the other interpretation that's genocide. I've only heard, been out on these protests, jihadi chants twice, intifada twice, and I've seen an intifada placard. But that's not to say there's not some very nasty people. If we ban them, is that, as Neil Basu, very senior Met officer, says, are we going to drive some of these youngsters into the jihadis? The jihadis who are there, the security service are very worried. 3,000 persons of interest they're trying to monitor, who the security service say are a real danger. 46,000 are of concern.
So the Prime Minister's words, did you see them as alarmist or did you see them as measured?
No, I thought they were measured. I think there are divisions. You only need to go on social media to see on both sides. No, there's an awful lot of venom directed against the entire Muslim community, not just the extremists, and also the other way around. So I think he's right. I think that it is divisive, it is worrying. There are things going on that we don't like to see in this country on all sides. And the police are worried about where this may all lead.
Okay.
I'm not sure banning protests is going to solve some of the problems.
Yeah, especially when they're lawful, or certainly appear to be. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Mostly lawful, I should say. Well, at the weekend, protesters targeted Barclays Bank. Ian, I think, is with us. Yes, he is. Hi, Ian, tell us more about why that happened.
Hello, Kay. Well, this is an organisation which calls itself the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and they allege that Barclays is an investor in and a lender to a number of defence companies that supply the Israeli army. The companies they've specifically singled out are General Dynamics, which is a $74 billion defence multinational. Probably a lot of people watching this programme will indirectly be invested in it via their savings and pension funds. The other is an Israeli company called Elbit Systems, which provides drone technology to the Israeli army. And accordingly, they protested a number of Barclays branches up and down the country on Saturday. Now, it's somewhat mistaken, the claims of this campaign, because Barclays is not an investor, a direct equity investor in any company. Barclays has put out statements. It says it's not an investor in Elbit Systems or the defence industry. It says Barclays is not an investor in Elbit Systems. The allegations that Barclays is an investor in the defence industry may stem from our historic ownership of a business called BGI, Barclays Global Investors, an asset management division which did have significant investment positions in defence companies. Barclays sold this company in 2009 and has no ongoing interest, financial or otherwise, in BGI. Now, that is not to say that Barclays may not be engaged in lending to the defence sector, but in doing so, it's probably in very good company. I suspect all of the major global banks similarly lend to defence companies.
OK, for now. Thanks very much, Ian. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you, the build-up to Sunday's Oscars, arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer will give us her predictions. Everybody, Katie is here. Oscars Sunday. Tell me more.
I know, it is rapidly hurtling towards us. Well, look, we've been talking about Oppenheimer throughout the award season, haven't we? Over the weekend, there's lots of various different guilds, and a lot of their members make up the Academy Awards members as well. It was the Editing Guild over the weekend, as ACE is their acronym, and again, Oppenheimer ended up being the big winner for the Editing Awards. They've now come away as the big winners at the Directors Guild, also at the Producers Guild, so it would seem fairly certain, given that some of those members cross over into the Academy Awards, that it is going to be Oppenheimer. That's the one that we're talking about next weekend. And also,
Barbie seems to have fallen away, doesn't it?
Sorry, what?
Barbie.
Barbie. Well, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? It's incredibly popular, but I mean, do these things translate into sort of critical?
We did a news quiz last Thursday night with Ian King, actually, and other people. When was Barbie released? I know, it's tricky.
Summer?
Yeah,
early
bit
summer.
more.
June. It all blurs into one for me.
It does.
Kay.
Tell me about the
Razzies. Oh, well, this is the good one as well. The day before the Oscars, you get the worst films in the year, which is always quite good to speculate who's going to come away as the year's biggest losers, if you like. Dame Helen Mirren's in the running, dare we say, for best worst actress for her role in Shazam last year, which was a superhero film that basically completely flopped at the box office. It does prove that actually you don't need to kind of assume that people will go and see superhero films, because often, there isn't a market if they're a bit rubbish like Shazam. This is Meg 2 as well, that you just saw on your screens. The sequel to the story of the return of the giant shark megalodons, which was, I mean, the first was kind of naff enough, but they 5 years later put out a sequel. But I think there's something quite, if you know what you're getting into and you know that it's going to be a bad film, there's something quite enjoyable in itself, isn't it, about seeing these naff ones? No, not really. If you're spending a lot of money, I guess.
Did you see me on the telly at the weekend?
I wanted to talk about this. You were on Michael McIntyre's The Wheel.
I was.
I mean, you got some tricky questions. The Olympics.
That was really hard, wasn't it?
Really hard.
And then Jessica Ennis Hill said, "Oh, is it the obvious answer?" It's like, all right, love.
What's the obvious one?
Well, I didn't think it was obvious.
Do you get G-force from going round that quickly?
It goes really fast. It goes really fast. I had to hold on a couple of times, I have to say. And I had the £88,000 question, and he didn't go with me.
Well, I mean, that's a lesson in itself, isn't it, Kay?
I know.
Listen to you, really.
It was also about the Oscars. Do you want me to test you?
Go on.
Which of the Star Wars actors was Oscar nominated? Do you want me to give you a list?
Give me a list.
Okay, it was either Hamill or Alec Guinness or Carrie Fisher or Harrison Ford.
Oscar Carrie Fisher, wouldn't it have been? Or Alec Guinness. Alec Guinness.
You can only have one.
Alec Guinness.
It was Alec Guinness.
Yes.
And he went with Harrison Ford.
Oh, but I would assume Harrison Ford would have been nominated for an Oscar over the years.
But not for Star Wars. And you've only got 30 seconds to think about it.
Yeah, I would be terrible at that.
Yeah. Are you going to come and talk to us next week about the Oscars?
I'm going to be on the carpet at the Vanity Fair party talking to you. Yeah.
Did you see the food we had earlier? I know, it was really good lobster first thing. How decadent is that?
Very decadent.
Yeah.
I'd expect nothing less.
There we are. There we are. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Temperatures slowly rising this week. The weather will settle down a little bit as well. Frosty start for many. Some fog patches mainly in the south. The fog will slowly lift during the morning to leave plenty of sunshine, but cloud and rain will spread across Ireland, South Wales and southwest England. It's going to be wet for Shetland.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
We look at the papers, haven't we?
Yeah, go on.
Front page of the Times at the moment. This talk we heard from Tobias Ellwood as well with regards to the Germans not being all that technologically savvy when it comes to state secrets and British secrets and the situation in Ukraine. Germans reveal secrets of UK military operations.
There we go.
And the front page of the Daily Mail, a big investigation about a scandal when it comes to care workers being brought over to the UK and basically being scammed and paying for a job when they shouldn't have to pay for it, potentially £20,000 even.
Yeah, I went with the Sun. And it's about Kate Middleton's uncle and will he spill the beans when he goes into Big Brother later on tonight. That would be interesting. My £10,000 question on the wheel was, do you know when the independence referendum was for Scotland? What year?
Oh, gosh.
I don't. I should do. Scotland.
Oh, God.
Mari should know. Don't look at me.
I don't know.
We're going to get 2014?
I mean, I was a teenager. I don't know.
2014?
Yeah, that feels about right.
You said 2016, did you? Did you say 2016?
In my gut says 2016, but then I'm like, is that too recent?
Because that was Brexit, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
2016.
And it was before. So.
Yeah, and it was when Germany won the World Cup.
1960.
2014, 2013?
2014.
There we
I can hear you
go.
shouting it at home. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.